Welcome to CandleLight Audiobook. The Villainess's Path to Redemption. Chapter 41. The next day. It was around when the sun was in the middle of the sky that Celine opened her eyes. Jessica had been unable to wake her up for breakfast, but she was able to come to her senses by lunchtime. "You're not sick, are you? Shall I call a doctor?" "No, it's okay. It's not like that." Jessica became very worried by Celine's words. She had skipped breakfast and decided to have lunch in her room. Despite her worries, however, Celine had just slept too long, so she didn't have an appetite. Drinking cool juice made her sober up a little. "How could I sleep for so long? I've been calling you since yesterday, but you didn't answer. I didn't ask for permission to come in because I thought you were ill, but even when I shook your body, you didn't get up, remaining sound asleep. Why was I so tired though? I didn't do much." "Do you want me to call a doctor now?" asked Jessica with a worried look. But Celine didn't feel the need for that, so she shook her head and refused it. She didn't feel sick anywhere, and because she felt as good as usual, she didn't think that illness was the issue. When the last drop of juice had been emptied, Jessica urged her to have some dessert. "Would you like dessert?" "No, it's fine." "Yes, miss." "Then, I'll clean it up." Jessica left the room after taking the empty bowl. As she followed Jessica with her eyes, Celine suddenly found the hourglass on the corner of the table. She had forgotten to put it away after checking to see if it was all right, and had fallen asleep with it out, leaving it unattended. After her late meal, she was so sleepy that she lifted up the hourglass without thinking about it and turned it over. Shururuk. After that faint noise, she put her hand on her chin to watch the falling grains of sand. That's when she heard Jessica's voice suddenly. "I've been calling you since yesterday, but you didn't answer. I didn't ask for permission to come in because I thought you were ill, but even when I shook your body, you didn't get up, remaining sound asleep." "What?" As Celine stared at her, who was repeating what she had said just a little while ago, Jessica asked with a worried face, "Do you want me to call a doctor now?" "No." "Why are you here again?" Celine didn't understand why Jessica was in her room. She was sure that she had taken the dishes and left the room. The dishes were all scattered on the table and had returned to their former locations. "Didn't you say you were going to clean up the bowls?" "Yes." "No. You haven't finished the juice yet. Shall I clean it up still?" Jessica asked with a very perplexed look. "I didn't finish the juice. I'm sure I finished my drinks," and I heard Jessica asking about dessert. As she lowered her gaze, she found that the glass that had had its contents emptied just now still had juice in it. There was no way Jessica could have refilled it in that short time. Celine hadn't seen her line up the dishes again, so she wouldn't have been able to. What the hell is this? Maybe. It was a very short time, but she was back in the past. It wasn't an illusion. There was no doubt that if the glass had still had juice in it, she would not have realized it. However, since it had been empty and it was now full again. Did this happen yesterday too? When I finished writing the letter and handed it to Jessica, did it return to the state with only Oscar's name written? She knew it was a ridiculous hypothesis, but she couldn't stop thinking like that. What the hell is the cause? She searched her memory of the previous day and of that day. There had to be some reason for it to happen. What in the world did I do before things got strange? The middle of her forehead narrowed by itself, but she had no memory of doing anything special. "Well, miss?" Celine, in agony and with a serious expression, remained without answering Jessica's question of, "Can I clean up the dishes?" Desperate for what to do, Jessica wandered around for a while, but soon decided to clean up the room until Celine finished wondering. It was a little messy since she hadn't been able to clean up the day before, because Celine had fallen asleep early. Her master had almost finished the meal, but there was no word yet to clean it up, so she sorted out the papers and took the quill and ink. Finally, she tried to pick up the hourglass with the intention of putting it back in the box. At that moment, Celine, whose eyes were following Jessica, suddenly jumped up, pointed at Jessica and screamed, "Hourglass." "Yes?" Not exactly at Jessica, but at the hourglass she was trying to pick up. Jessica, who was surprised, fell back on her butt. Luckily, she was the only one who got hurt since she had not grabbed the hourglass yet. Celine, who did not care about this, raised her voice as if she had found the answer. It was the hourglass. Something special had happened. Yesterday, she had pulled the frame out, revealing the secret space, and touched the hourglass. And as soon as she had turned it over, Jessica, who had left the room, had come back in and asked for a letter again, despite the fact that she had already given it to her. Today, she had also turned the hourglass over on the table. Then, Jessica had immediately appeared and repeated what she had said, and the juice that had been cleanly emptied was filling the glass again. Celine's gaze was naturally thrust at the hourglass. The quiet grains of sand that sat there as if nothing had happened seemed a little different. It was very mysterious and beautiful to see the light shining through them. How can this be? Celine screamed suddenly, and Jessica looked at her with embarrassment. Celine had her hands clasped while smiling this time. Is she okay? Do I have to call a doctor? Those were the questions going through Jessica's mind. As if to add a question to her questions, Celine said suddenly and nonsensically. Jessica, God seems to love me. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been likely for God to have sent such a great thing to her, even though he had revived her. No, it might be that he had given her his grace in the name of punishing the wicked woman. Whatever it was a blessing and a miracle to Celine. So, I have to fulfill that expectation, don't I? Sharuruk. After checking all of the sand had settled at the bottom, she overturned the hourglass again. Nothing happened this time. Nevertheless, facing Jessica's worried expression, Celine did not remove her very bright smile. Somehow, she seemed to have figured out how the hourglass worked. Once a day, if she overturned the hourglass, she would go back by a very short time. The time was approximately 5 minutes. She was able to go back for as long as it took for all of the sand to reach the bottom. Fortunately, no one other than Celine could use it. She had figured that out after running a test on Jessica. Celine had ordered Jessica to sit quietly in her room for about 5 minutes. Then, she had left the room and had told Jessica to turn the hourglass over before telling Celine to come back. If the hourglass had worked for Jessica like it had for her, she would have been unable to remember Jessica sitting quietly. After several similar experiments, not once did things go back. It was God's blessing for Celine only. The hour of the day was irrelevant. The 5-minute restriction cleared every day. The only side effect was that when she used the hourglass, she became very tired. Don't tell me. Is it eating my life? She thought suddenly. What kind of dream would that be to run back time for nothing? But, her assumption wasn't absurd when she took her extreme fatigue into account. It felt as if she was making up that time with sleep, but it might also be that her overall lifespan was shortening. Chapter 42. Even if it takes half of my life, I can't afford to miss this opportunity. I will use the hourglass over and over to destroy Lyra thoroughly. If you are insulted daily, you will not be able to live in your right mind. And taking away your precious things would be very easy. I will turn the hourglass over, and take away your father, your loved one, and those who follow you. In the end, as you made me poison your tea in the past, I will make you do it yourself, and then, it'll be off with your head. Haha. The mere imagination alone made her burst with laughter. When she did so in the middle of class, Mrs. White smiled softly and asked why she was laughing. Did something good happen for you? Yes, something very good has happened. Celine glanced at the hourglass, which was within reach of her. Since she hadn't used to it yet, she thought it wouldn't be too bad to use it on Mrs. White. What good things have happened to you? I'm curious. Do you want to know? Yes, they say that sharing good things makes your joy doubled. I want to share in what good thing has happened to Lady Celine. She was quite a nuisance. Since her teaching skills were poor, her classes were useless. In addition, she normally bothered Celine by expressing her intentions as she urged Celine to meet her son, Aphon, displaying her insidious, innermost thoughts. In the past, you took him, who was pretty hung up to me, away heartlessly. Celine still remembered Mrs. White, who had turned up very chilly for her son, who had gotten drunk, after judging that Celine had outer beauty, but that there was nothing to be gained from her. She had left with her son while leaving these words behind: "Do not hang out with such a vulgar girl. I met an old fox." An old fox? Yes. A very old and ugly fox. Is that a good thing, the very old fox? The Viscountess asked, cocking her head. Sure. The fox is very cute. She doesn't know who she is and looks around for anything to gain. It's worth watching her. I'm going to play with her until all of her bones are crushed. The Viscountess's face hardened immediately. It seemed difficult to answer to that statement. That was because the story had been a little horrible and cruel to have come out of the mouth of such a young girl. You must have a cute pet. I really want to see it too. Nevertheless, she had to agree with Celine because she wanted something. A fox was not a pet, and she wondered why Celine was raising an old fox, but she did not say such a negative thing. Celine responded with a smile as fresh as a flower and said to Mrs. White, "You can meet her without even trying." After her gaze went through the Viscountess, it headed to the mirror near the dressing room. It meant that the Viscountess could meet her if looked in the mirror. However, it was inevitable that she would have to explain it in a slightly more straightforward manner, as the Viscountess didn't understand what she was saying. Sometimes, I get irritated. She keeps asking me to see her boy, who has nothing to see. She seems to want to raise her status somehow. She doesn't even know who she is. Celine wanted Mrs. White not to bother her anymore. She would meet her son eventually and make full use of him. Don't you know this makes me want to throw you away? It was only then that Mrs. White realized that the old fox was not a pet, and her face froze. That was because Celine, who had always been nice and gentle, had changed. Still, she did not realize that the old fox was herself. She had never thought Celine to be mean to her, so she wasn't seeing what was suddenly in front of her face since they had gotten along well so far. Well, who is it? How did she offend such a kind and loving lady? That's right. I am very sorry to see her trying to please me without knowing it's her, Celine replied, smiling softly and taking a sip of the cold tea. At last, she realized that the old fox was her, so she dropped the book she held in her hand. Her hands shook, as if she were deeply embarrassed, and she was unable to say anything back. Celine watched her ugly appearance for a moment. She imagined Mrs. White might try to do something wrong, but she didn't think she would. No, she seemed shocked enough not to think of it. How naive did you think me to be? Shall I stop now? Celine hadn't found it funny, and she shouldn't use the hourglass for such a trifle. She guessed that it had been about 5 minutes, so she reached out and grabbed the hourglass. Celine, who turned it over without regret, said to the Viscountess, who was back to her old self with her pretentiously soft expression, "Your class is always fun and enjoyable." The friendly class continued. It was a week before her servant was able to give Oscar the gift in return for the dress. As it happened, the servant could not visit the academy on weekdays, and Oscar was busy on weekends, perhaps because the semester was nearly over. Therefore, Oscar received it without checking its contents. He didn't know what would be in it and he was stupid. The servant bowed apologetically, saying that he hadn't received any messages from Oscar. "I'm so sorry, miss. I tried to get a message from him, but he turned around coldly." "It's okay. You did a good job. Go back and rest now. Take the rest of the day off." "Yeah." The servant, who had been expecting her to scold him, had no choice but to raise his head and look at Celine at her sudden declaration that he take a day break. Her expression was full of mercy and composure, contrary to his expectation of her being vile. She looked like a little angel, so he was mesmerized by her. Even as he gazed at her rudely, Celine smiled at him without punishing him. "Is there anything else you need to say?" "Oh, no. Thank you. If you're done with your work, leave the room." When the servant realized his fault, he hurried out of Celine's room. Jessica, who had been watching from the back, measured Celine's complexion and temper, but she still looked well. "I thought he might turn it down right away, on the spot, but I'm glad he didn't." The fact that he had taken the gift would make Oscar have to do something after later confirming how expensive the brooch was. He could not send back a gift he had already accepted through her servant, so he would either come to her himself or send something as a thanks again. If fate was willing to make them connect, then so it would be. A completely unrelated man and woman would never exchange gifts and letters again. She wondered if she could take his heart someday if she built up a friendship this way. Of course, if things became complicated, she was confident she could make use of the hourglass. Look forward to it, Lyra. I'll make you pay for taking my life. It was about 2 weeks before Oscar's reply arrived. She was so nervous that she couldn't sleep properly. She couldn't help but scream as soon as the letter from him arrived. Celine opened the letter with trembling hands. The neat and elegant handwriting added heat to her heart. Dear Celine Vermont. Thank you for your gift. I'd like to meet you in person, so I'd appreciate it if you would send me a date and time when you can. Oscar Frederick. She was a little disappointed because the length of the letter was shorter than she had expected. Just like Celine's letter, it was not too long, but it was filled with important points. The letter seemed to give her no space for a close relationship, and it left her with no room to carry on the exchange. But it was enough to get his reply letter. It was a little early to be disappointed because her plan was to start building that relationship from scratch anyway. With the mysterious hourglass, she could turn time back at any moment and somehow manage to steal his heart. Chapter 43. He also mentioned that he had received the gift, so that meant that he would not return it. What does he want to talk about in person? Again, Celine hurriedly and excitedly called for Jessica. Jessica. Yes. Miss. Get the letter paper and a pen. I need to write my reply letter. Facing her visible urgency, Jessica hurried to bring the paper and pen. As soon as she put them down, Jessica felt complicated feelings as she looked at Celine, who wrote the letter in a careful manner. It was a great pleasure for her to regain her beautiful, bright demeanor, since she had been a little nervous lately, but the problem was that it was Oscar who had given her joy. Of all people. Before she announced the sender to the public, she came to Celine, so only Jessica knew the secret that it was Oscar's letter. However, it was only a matter of time before that information would catch Lyra's ears through their constant exchange. She didn't think there would be any big trouble because Lyra was friendly and benevolent. On the other hand, she was somewhat anxious. Jessica hoped nothing would happen. Celine, who wrote an answer in a clumsy but neat style, ordered Jessica to seal it. So, send it back to Oscar. Jessica was so flushed that she sealed the letter tightly with wax as red as her cheeks, which resembled fresh peaches. Although she could not see what was written inside, with Celine's urging words, Jessica sensed intuitively that the contents would have a bad effect on the mansion. Celine either played with the hourglass or immersed herself in reading, unmoved as her birthday neared. The most enjoyable of all the things she did was to order a good selection of tarts and macarons and then devour them in 5 minutes. She smiled at Jessica, who was speechless and astonished, then turned the hourglass over and brought time back to before she had eaten everything and repeated the process. What could make me happier than eating a lot of delicious food than turning back time to when I hadn't yet eaten? In addition, she would sometimes fill up a bottle of water and go into Lyra's room and pour the contents on her head. Lyra's face, wide-eyed with embarrassment, was extremely eye-catching. It was somehow pleasant to have Emma's fierce hostility behind her. You treat me like a wicked woman, so I'll do something really bad and show you just how bad I am. At first, Celine grabbed her by the head, asking her to confess the truth, but she was almost taken into custody as Lyra shouted, "You are insane." It was not easy to get a full confession out of someone when there was no confession to make yet. Wouldn't it matter if she poured water on Lyra since she had encouraged her maid to do so in the past? No, it would be okay if she turned the hourglass over. Of course, if anyone found out about it, they would probably say it was a worthless action, but it was a small pleasure for Celine's dull daily life. She wanted to resolve the sorrows of the past. So, as usual, she played a small mischief on Lyra with the hourglass and tried to savor the tea afterward. At that moment, Jessica, who had gone to the bookstore to check if the books Celine had ordered had come in, returned with a bright face. "Miss. I've got the new book. Really? It came in sooner than I thought. Celine's face brightened as she accepted the new economics book. There were numerous books on economics in the mansion, but they didn't match Celine's standards. She had tried to understand them somehow in the meantime, but it was impossible for her to comprehend even one page. So, through Jessica, she ordered the bookstore to find a new, easier book, and fortunately, she was able to order a basic economics book that was ready by very young nobleman. "Miss, would you like some tea?" "Please." Since it had been a while since a new book had arrived for her, Celine soon became absorbed in her reading. The reason why she had gotten hold of the economics book was very simple. She needed background knowledge to talk to the Count about his business in the future. There would be a limit to her simply releasing information without any knowledge. He might doubt the source of the information, and her credibility would also drop. Knowledge of economics and politics was essential because she intended to build her own business in addition to releasing information. That was because there was a limit to sticking to someone's sweet honey. If she were to be discarded, she would lose her head again. If they compare a woman to a flower, they treat her like an ornament, but if she has the power to impose herself like any other male aristocrat, she will be treated differently. She had heard of such a female aristocrat in the past. She remembered sneering at one, saying, "She doesn't know herself," but it was Celine who hadn't known herself. So, now, I have to figure out who I am and build up knowledge. Celine was preoccupied herself with reading the new book for a while. No matter how basic the book was, it took her tens of minutes or even hours to turn a page in the absence of a teacher. Celine, however, did not give up, reading the same page for several days as she tried to understand the contents. "I wish I had changed my gender when I returned to the past." If that had happened, she would have gone to the academy like her half-brother and received education on various topics because it was essential for a male aristocrat to complete his studies there. Having been born as a pretty woman, she thought there would be nothing to be envious of, but now, she thought that having a pretty face was poison. She hadn't gotten a proper grasp of reality thanks to those who had praised her beauty. She hadn't known that the praise was fleeting, like petals falling off a flower. She had been looking at what she didn't know for a long time, so Celine, who had started getting a headache, touched her head. Jessica, who brought her a new cup of tea and some dried fruit, waited in the corner and glanced at her. When Celine noticed that she had something to say and looked at her, Jessica asked what she had been thinking lately. "Well, miss. I'm sorry to bother your reading, but can I ask you a question?" "Tell me." It wouldn't be a bad idea to have a quick chat to cool off her head. Celine lifted her cup and answered after taking a sip of the warm green tea. "Do we really need to simplify your birthday party? I think we can make it a little bigger." On her first birthday after her entry into Count Virmont's family, they had invited musicians and entertainers from various fields and had a splendid day. In particular, when Jessica recalled the screaming and cheering from her master during the magic show when the magician took pigeons out of a hat, she asked again, "Why don't you invite a magician?" She seemed worried that she might be scolded after making that simple suggestion. "No. Just invite a few acquaintances as scheduled, and I'll have a quiet lunch." Birthday parties were also a showcase of wealth, power, and personal connections, so most aristocrats prepared colorful and splendid parties, but the present Celine did not feel the need for that. It was clear that she, who was a Virmont only in name, would be a laughing stock if she held a big party that was not within her means. Even if it was a place to show off wealth, an excessive display that did not match her level would be laughed at. Just be careful about the food. Prepare sweets that would be loved by young ladies of my age. Yes. She remembered having parties that were grander and more colorful than Lyra's in the past. Even though she had known that she had been criticized from behind for being the blood-sucking parasite on the Virmonts, she had had no choice but to do so because she had had nothing. In those days, she couldn't have borne her jealousy if she hadn't dressed herself up and shown herself that everything was all right. Unlike Lyra, who had grouped herself with great people, there had been nothing for Celine to put forth. Chapter 44. But not now. She was different from the past, when she had lived in a constant struggle. She couldn't do the same now that she was aware of her position and of herself and had realized what the consequences of her every move would be. No, she wouldn't do the same. Besides, she couldn't afford to devote her time to such a small birthday party. If I use what I know to build wealth and power, I'll have to have a big party someday, even if I don't want to. It was a future that would be achieved if she went forward like this. Jessica's expression darkened at Celine's determined answer. She seemed to think that she should keep up her master's public appearance because Celine was her master. The acts were not far away because she had already contacted the band and entertainers, so if she just called them on the day, they would come right away. Jessica added at last, "If you change your mind, please let me know. We'll get ready quickly." It was just in case. Recently, Celine had been quiet and changed, but more than anything, she had always been fickle. It wouldn't be strange if she were to shout out that she wanted Jessica to call the magician and the entertainers on her birthday. Soon after Celine's birthday, Lyra's birthday would come. As always, Lyra had invited a number of reputable acquaintances and would have a decent and grand party, so if she prepared a simple party for Celine, a thunderbolt would fall on her later. "It won't happen, but well, thank you. You sent them the invitations, didn't you?" "Yes, I sent them to all of the people you mentioned and I received answers right away. They were just the few young ladies who she had met through Corinne, but she invited them because she had to do something." Fortunately, after receiving the birthday invitation from their new friend, they all happily sent a positive reply. "Is this the end of what you wanted to say?" "Yes, miss." "Okay, then leave." The vanity and pretense that Celine had devoted herself to had been pushed out of her life because it hadn't helped at all in saving her life. Jessica left, and Celine focused on reading again. A gift arrived for Celine when her birthday was just around the corner. Celine was puzzled by it and asked the sender about it because she was still young, so she hadn't met anyone who could have sent her a gift. The butler answered, maintaining his soft demeanor toward her, "The Count sent it." "My father sent it to me?" "Yes." "Shall I get it?" "Please." The Count had to be busy preparing for his business in the north, so why would he send a gift? Some time later, after the sound of a knock on the door, Celine gave them permission to enter, and a servant with a huge body came into her room with the butler. The servant was carrying the Count's gift, which the butler had referred to. It was a box large enough to reach her waist. Celine was surprised to see the box placed down in the middle of the room. "My father sent this?" "Yes, that's right." Inside, there were some fur-lined coats, a few luxurious dresses, cute ornaments that girls of her age could use, and a plushie decorated with jewelry. The teddy bear with a large jewel in its eyes, nose, and ears was not a regular item even at a glance. The handwritten letter contained a message saying that he was sorry since he could not be with her, that he congratulated her for her birthday, and that he would be back soon. "I guess things have worked out a lot better than I thought. I can't believe that he even wrote a letter himself and sent me a gift." In the past, that had never been the case. He had just given her money for a birthday party. Therefore, she wasn't expecting much, but his business seemed to be going well now. Not many places produced fur. It was produced only in the north. It would be easy to monopolize once he got the right accounts through. It would be difficult to break a deal halfway against a noble, so now, the Count would accumulate massive wealth from the monopolized fur. "You changed your mind this much with just one piece of information. Isn't that too easy, father?" Well, that was why he had fallen for her beautiful mother. She wished she could take away Lyra's seat as easily. Celine, smiling from the tens of thousands of thoughts of harming Lyra, appeared to others to be just a little girl who was delighted to receive her father's gift. She had a class with Corinne in the afternoon. It was the last class before her birthday, which would be soon. Celine was going to ask Corinne for a favor in that day's class, which would bond the close connection between them. While waiting for her, she absorbed herself in reading. Time passed, and she heard the sound of the carriage outside the window. It might be someone visiting, so when she looked out, she saw that the carriage had come to a stop near the mansion. When Celine opened the window and stuck her head out, she could see Corinne was in a benevolent mood that day. Celine waved her hand and welcomed her loudly and enthusiastically. As it had always been, Corinne raised her head and turned to Celine's room, and the two shared the joy of their reunion with smiles. "Corinne. Lady Celine." At first, she had pretended to be an innocent girl with the idea of showing herself that way, but recently, she was attending class showing half of her true self. Corinne was the only one who could certainly help her at this time, and she was somehow at ease with her. In the past, she had been scolded thousands of times not to run in the mansion, but not after her return to the past. The only response she got now was, "How happy you are to act like that." That was because everyone knew she had changed. It was because they knew she acted gracefully like a butterfly every day. Although she was acting the same way as in the past, their reactions varied widely depending on her regular behavior. Furthermore, it was already clear that Celine was particularly fond of Corinne. There was no one to help her, and Corinne was just a humble, etiquette teacher, but Celine followed her meticulously. That made her look like an innocent girl, one who did not ask anything, looking simply at people for who they were. However, none of them knew how calculating she was. "Teacher." When she reached the first floor, Celine ran to her and hugged her waist. "You should have stayed in your room since I'm going up anyway." Though she answered coldly, her arms gently hugged Celine. Celine felt affection from the hands that swept across her back. "I saw you, and without even realizing." "Well, what did I say about the greeting? I'll have to train you from the start again." As Corinne warned her with a face that did not look harsh at all, Celine released her hands from her waist, grabbed her own skirt and curtsied to greet her gracefully. Corinne also greeted Celine politely. "You're cold, aren't you? Let's not dally here and go up instead." "Let's do that." The two went up to the third floor, hand in hand. They had a friendly chat with each other before they started the class, drinking warm rosemary tea to warm their chilled bodies. Celine's upcoming birthday was the main topic of the conversation, and that was the topic Celine had hoped for. "So, it's Celine's birthday soon." "That's right. Do you have anything special you want?" Corinne would have already prepared a gift because the party was in a few days, but she looked ready to offer Celine anything she wanted. How can I not respond to her when she came into the snare with her own feet? Contrary to what she had in mind, Celine mumbled and did not answer easily. When her reply was delayed, Corinne said either some jewelry or a dress would be good. "No, I've already got dresses and ornaments. Those are enough. I'm more of a..." Celine blushed and twisted her body. She looked ashamed to continue. What the hell does she want? Chapter 45. Celine, who had been taking a short pause, replied with a shy smile. "I want to get a handkerchief embroidered by my teacher." Oh, my God. How could she be so pure? It was just a handkerchief, and she could always give it as a gift. If she said, "Let's stop today's class and embroider," she would have been able to make some. Celine's eyes glistened as if she were being sincere. Corinne was moved and unknowingly stroked Celine's head. "Do you really think that's enough? It's just a handkerchief. I can make 10 or 100 and give them to you at any time." "Yes. I don't know if it's a little too much to ask, but I hope you'll do a lot of embroideries that are a little different from what we've been doing. There should be many different patterns. It's not too much. I'll give you a handkerchief full of embroideries that you can be sure will have all my enthusiasm and passion, so look forward to it." Much like Celine's, Corinne's eyes also sparkled. Seeing her pumping her fist was a very reliable sight. Corinne would be busy later because she would make her debut in society with the changing of the year. She would meet Marquis Vincent soon. Now was the right time to receive a sincere gift from her. It was going to happen anyway, but Celine added a small piece of advice to make her look better later. "And why don't you make another for yourself just like the one for me? It will look like we have a deep bond, and like we are close." "Oh. I'm sorry if I thought so on my own. I just love you so much. I just hope you think so too." Because of the beautiful embroidery in the handkerchief, Marquis Vincent would take an interest in Corinne, so it would be perfect if she caught the eye of the Marquis with the handkerchief that matched Celine's. Maybe Corinne would think that it was thanks to Celine that the Marquis would fall in love with her, and she might express her gratitude to her in some way. Corinne might consider her a lifelong benefactor, saying, "Thanks to your request for the handkerchief, the Marquis showed interest in me." It was predestined, but it was not bad to add a little flavor. I also love Celine very much. I want us to be lifelong friends. Corinne's voice was filled with her feelings. She appeared as if she'd cry if Celine threw in a few more words. She also had an expression on her face that told Celine that she would make a great handkerchief in a few days and nights. Sure enough, Corinne's eyes were filled with tears. She was still young and seemed to be sensitive. Corinne had liked kids in the past. Celine's age was not very different from hers, but she looked like a child because she was smaller than those her age, even though a huge viper coiled inside her body. I'm looking forward to your social debut more than to my birthday. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. A once-in-a-lifetime social debut. There, women prove their worth and show off to gain a foothold. The social world is the place where rumors circulate most quickly, so influential women naturally hold power there. Of course, the center of that power is wealth. Therefore, no matter how important a social debut might be, it was not something that had much to do with Corinne currently. It was no use drawing attention to herself, who was a lady of an average Viscount family. Corinne was far from important, although she might draw attention for a moment if she looked gorgeous. Maybe that was why she had a bit of a bitter smile on her face at the mention of it. Well, I don't really expect much. Why? I don't think anything special is going to happen. From her inflection, she seemed to have given up. Perhaps, that wasn't the case only for her, but her acquaintances and family members might not be expecting much either, except Celine, who knew the events of the future. So, Celine took Corinne's hands and said, "Don't say that. It can't be. I'm sure I feel like something good is waiting for you. I would all come down to meeting a man, like with her mother, the Countess." Corinne had a good life, but it was certainly a good thing that her life would get a little better. I'm glad you said that. Thank you. Corinne might think it was a childish talk from someone who didn't know the world yet, so Celine thought it would be better to stop at this point. It wouldn't work even if she exaggerated her statements anyway. Celine turned the subject around then. So, what do you want to do first when you grow up? At Celine's question, Corinne stared at her and smiled softly, saying, "Teach children." Sarah wants to be a teacher? Like now? Yes, that's right. Thanks to Celine. Thanks to me? Celine cocked her head at the mysterious answer. Yes, these classes with Celine have been a dream. When I become an adult, I want to be a teacher who teaches cute and lovely children like Celine. Corinne blushed as she answered, and Celine was so surprised that she couldn't keep her mouth shut. She hadn't expected that to happen. Corinne seemed to like her more than she had thought. It was all Celine could think of when she heard Corinne's plans for the future. How can I not use Corinne like this? Isn't that an insult to God? Without a way to avoid it, Corinne pleaded for the serpent to open its mouth and bite into her. Then, I want to help you. Let's teach kids together later. I'll study hard and become the best teacher. That's good. Despite the cold weather, the two, who had stuck to the warm atmosphere, began the class after several more inconsequential conversations. As always, she reviewed what she had already learned and was showered with praises from Corinne, but the class was much more informative and enjoyable than learning new things. In fact, it's a secret, but I'm looking forward to Lady Celine's debut, not my own. Why? You are so lovely and beautiful that when you make your debut in society, you'll soon mesmerize everyone. At Corinne's sincere words, Celine smiled innocently and held her hand. Would I really? Of course, I am sure that. I'm so excited just thinking about it. Are you going to stay with me? Of course. Aside for the Duke's family, who had inherited the blood of the royal family, if the Marquise, who was the pinnacle of power, would help her debut in society, no one would be able to ignore her as before. Celine, who hid her insidious, innermost thoughts, remained a lovely girl to Corinne. Why doesn't Oscar come? I had told him to visit me today in the letter. Is it possible that I wrote the date incorrectly? Celine was worried that he wouldn't come even though a lot of the day was still left. There was the possibility that he couldn't come because he was busy during the semester. No, if so, she would have likely received a reply, but seeing that there was no news, that meant that he was coming. When is he coming? A lady, who was visiting to celebrate Celine's birthday, said hello carefully, as it seemed her anxiety was starting to show on her face. Are you sick, Lady Celine? No. When the young lady said that, the eyes of other young ladies sitting around the table, which wasn't very big, were drawn to Celine. Now, the worries were coming from Celine, but from the other ladies who had come to congratulate her. Celine pretended not to be unwell and smiled brightly, denying it again. I'm really okay. I just couldn't sleep because I was so excited about today. It was my first time inviting people over. Oh, I see. I understand that. Only then did the mood return. The young ladies in the indoor garden smiled softly to the quiet tune. Everyone celebrated Celine's birthday with a glass of non-alcoholic champagne. I'm glad there's a band. Celine had been reluctant to accept Jessica's request for a band just before her birthday. Without it, however, it would have been a small, miserable birthday party. So, Celine decided to give Jessica something as a gift. Let's open the presents first. Let's do that. Celine unwrapped the packages with an excited expression even though she was not expecting much of the gifts that came in small sizes. Wow! That's a cute hairpin. Chapter 46. Not surprisingly, all of their gifts were small jewelry or a music box. Celine smiled brightly, putting the hairpin on her head. Thank you all so much. I need to find a place for the music box in my room right away. Actually, it was too simple and tacky, so Celine thought she should give it to Jessica. The last one she opened was Corinne's gift. The surface of the box was sprinkled with fine gold powder, so she was a little excited. Perhaps, it might be the best of them all. Do you like it? There were a handkerchief and gloves in the box, all beautifully embroidered. Needless to say, the combination of beautiful flowers and fine embroidery surrounding the trim was fantastic. Was this really made by a human? She was speechless for a moment and couldn't react. I had a hard time adjusting the patterns. Corinne took a handkerchief of the same pattern from her sleeve and smiled. Not one, but two. Indeed, it deserved to catch the eyes of the blunt, serious Marquis. It's more beautiful than I thought it would be. I don't know how to thank you. No, I'm sorry I couldn't prepare something better. Celine responded with a distinctly different response, and the ladies became curious to see the handkerchief. Corinne showed them the handkerchief on behalf of Celine, who was still stunned. The young ladies who saw the beautifully embroidered handkerchief reacted similarly to Celine. They didn't seem to know that Corinne could make such great embroidery. Isn't it God's work? That's all I can think about. That's amazing. Corinne replied shyly to their praise, that's too much. That's not too much. This is such a treasure that you have to hand down from generation to generation. Sure. I hope many people will see it somewhere with an exhibition on embroidery. That makes sense. It's a work of art. Celine was a little offended when they said they would have an exhibition later on. If so, Corinne's skill, which only she had known of, would be shared with others. Although she did not express her feelings, the number of replies she gave diminished. After extensive praise for Corinne's embroidery, they soon changed subjects. Quite rightly, the dress Celine was wearing was the next target. By the way, Lady Celine's dress is very beautiful. That's right. It's a very nice color, and it's very stylish. Yes, the fur coat you were wearing was also luxurious and even looked soft. Where did you get it? Celine looked shy at their questions. That way, she would seem humble. I didn't buy it. I don't have that type of sense. Then, did you get it as a gift? Yes. It was sent by my father, who went up to the north. The young ladies nodded in agreement because there were not many fathers who sent gifts like those to their daughters. They also praised her for being pretty and looking good in them. Having met a few times, the girls now considered Celine as perfectly saintly. She was not a wicked woman to them, as she had been called before, and she was able to show them how well she was doing with the Count. Celine hit the last wedge. In fact, I like the other gift better than this dress and fur. Unlike clothes, which I can't wear every day, I can hug it and sleep with it. What was the gift that is better than this beautiful dress? The young lady's curiosity grew. What is it? Celine answered, her cheeks blushing shyly. A bear doll. Since she was not a little girl, Celine was old enough to have relinquished her toys. However, because Celine was the youngest among them and she was rather small in size, her answer of the doll was very naturally accepted by everyone. In addition, she would validate her cute and innocent image. Oh, my. A teddy bear doll. I remember once sleeping with a very cute doll in my arms. At least 2 or 3 years before her age, but they smiled and talked to Celine as if she were a very young sister. Perhaps because of her image in that moment, Corinne also couldn't hide her expression of adoration and had an appropriate response to Celine's fancy doll. Can I see the cute doll if it doesn't bother you? I wonder what cute doll stole Lady Celine's heart. Though she was going to relinquish her hobby of showing of her things, she couldn't help bragging when they kept asking her questions. So, Celine ordered Jessica to bring the doll. I wonder how cute it is to hug and sleep with. I also wonder. A clear laugh sounded in the garden, like small birds announcing the morning. Apparently, the cute teddy bear had too much jewelry to be described as cute, but they didn't seem to have any idea. Can they really keep those soft face even after the doll they want appears? It was not long before she could see how they would look. Celine hugged the doll with the large jeweled eyes, nose, and ears, and rubbed her face against it innocently. It's cute, isn't it? I have a more special feeling toward it because it's a gift from my father. All of them had stunned postures. That was because the families of the young ladies who had gathered there had no power and were poor by comparison. It seemed that they had not expected that a teddy bear with such expensive gems would appear because they had treated Celine, who hung out with them, as someone from their same station. They might have seen a toy with small jewels on its eyes or nose, or even ears, but even that was rare. The young ladies realized then that Celine was a daughter of the family of Count Vermont, who had a great fortune in business, and that she was loved by the Count much more than they had thought. The indoor garden was enveloped in silence. That was because they suddenly realized the difference between Celine and themselves. They had thought Celine to be like a younger, cute sister, but the mood turned strangely just by the presence of that small doll. Celine cocked her head as if she could not understand why. Still, Corinne, who was changing her estimation of Celine, spoke up because Celine became sullen, as if she had done something wrong because no one had said anything. What a cute doll. It's rare to see a doll with jewels even in its ears, but the Count wanted to present a good doll to Lady Celine, right? Well, I think so too. It is a much cuter doll than I thought it would be, so I was speechless for a moment. Only then did Celine regain her innocent smile. The atmosphere did not go back completely to how it was, but at any rate, on the surface, it did become cheerful and giggly. From the main dish to the sweet, 3-tiered cake, the dishes made by the cooks Jessica had invited from outside boosted the party's excitement. Although there were few invited people, and no eye-catching event, the party was also an opportunity for Celine to show how much she was loved and pure. Of course, it was a very simple but satisfying party for Celine, except for the fact that the invited young ladies were very insignificant. It was also satisfying because she never thought of getting anything in the first place. Should I just finish this here? She was nervous that Oscar hadn't come, but her goal had already been achieved. She had gotten Corinne's handkerchief. To begin with, it was usual to end a miner's birthday party in a short and concise manner. They couldn't stay up all night drinking like adults. Moreover, they were not young men, but young ladies, so they didn't know what kind of danger might befall them at night. They had to go back before sunset, so Celine announced the end of the party. Well, thank you all for coming today. The time wasted seemed to have been enough. She didn't want to exchange any more pretentious laughter with the humble young ladies. It was more beneficial for her to go back and read a book and wait for Oscar. Time has already passed, just like that. That's right. I had so much fun that I didn't know the time was passing so fast. Satisfied with the simple but hearty party, the ladies also accepted Celine's wishes. That was how Celine's birthday party was supposed to end, if an unexpected guest hadn't come by. "Sister, I've been looking for you for a long time." "Lyra? How come Lyra is at my birthday party?" Chapter 47. Without giving Celine any time to doubt her intentions, Lyra entered the indoor garden. A large bouquet of flowers was being held by Emma, who followed her, as if to celebrate Celine's birthday. "Why didn't you invite me?" "It was a little sad. I came here because I thought you'd forgotten." "Happy birthday, sister. Are you here to humiliate me?" Otherwise, she would not have gone there on purpose. She had never visited Celine before. Lyra could not give up her wicked nature, so she attacked Celine at just the right time, and Celine couldn't laugh at all. Celine had shown a lukewarm response to Lyra's story, so the ladies naturally thought that Lyra didn't attend her birthday party because Lyra and Celine didn't have a good relationship. At that moment, Celine responded with an exaggerated look of surprise. "That can't be? I've tried to invite you several times, but I just couldn't tell you about the party because you were sick. You've been eating in your room for months." "Oh, you did. But, when I was feeling better, I went down a few times and had a meal. I thought you'd left me out on purpose again. I guess I must have been mistaken." Without giving Celine a moment to answer, Emma presented the bouquet to her in response to Lyra's regretful reply. "I thought you liked flowers, so I prepared these. Don't you like them?" "No, they're pretty. I'm just here to make an appearance, so I'll go now. Don't forget to invite me on your next birthday. Have a nice party, then." It was the same when Lyra handed her the flowers, of course. Lyra seemed to think Celine would retort, so she turned around right away without giving Celine time to do so. Celine, embarrassed by Lyra, who was turning around with her perfectly happy face, looked around frantically for the hourglass. That's when she realized that the hourglass was not there. She hadn't brought it because she hadn't thought she'd need the hourglass for that little party of all occasions. "What shall I do? If I go to my room right now and get it, will I get back within 5 minutes?" Celine was left there looking anxious, measuring the time that had passed while Lyra had already left. To change the strange atmosphere, the young ladies awkwardly praised Lyra's bouquet of flowers. "Those are pretty flowers." "That's right." Realizing that it was too late to get the hourglass, Celine sighed inaudibly and changed her expression into a good one. There was no point in regretting what had already been done. Moreover, she couldn't hastily use the hourglass for such a trifle when Oscar might show up. She gave the bouquet of flowers to Jessica and returned to her place with a very bright and pleasant expression on her face. Celine couldn't let the awkward atmosphere that Lyra had created continue. She couldn't come down to the dining hall because she was sick for some time. "I think she's feeling better. I was worried about her, but I'm really glad." At Celine's expression of genuine joy, the awkwardness of her demeanor to the slightest provocation disappeared at once. It seemed that they had really accepted what she had said, that she hadn't been able to invite Lyra because she had been sick. It was true that she had pretended to be sick, so Celine was able to carry on the conversation without difficulty. "I see. I hadn't heard anything about Lady Lyra lately. I think she's been sick since my father went to the northern province." "That's a pity. It's a disease instigated for her longing for her father." The young ladies quickly understood the situation because it could happen at Lyra's age, even though her illness spawned more from her anger against Celine, who didn't act as she had expected. Celine was able to regain the initiative. "It could be. Her brother, Darian, isn't here since he went to the academy, and somehow." Celine took a sip of tea and paused for a moment before she continued to speak. It was a sign that the words were difficult to say. She opened her mouth again, with a pitiful look, pulling down her eyebrows. "It's been a while since her father remarried my mother, and she is not happy with us. She feels like she was left alone." Of course, it was Celine who had been left alone, but she had a lonely expression as she said that. Corinne, who noticed this, consoled her. "Don't look like that, Celine. You can't help it because Lady Lyra is still young. Family isn't so easily formed. It'll be all right in a little while. Thank you, Corinne. With that, Lyra's attack passed as happenstance, like a failed bullet. Lyra's plan to make her only sister into a bad sister who hadn't invited her to her birthday party had gone wrong, and that was all because of Lyra herself, who was displeased with meeting strangers. Fortunately, the image Celine had built over several meetings was not destroyed by Lyra's one-time mischief. On the contrary, Lyra had given her an excuse that had solidified Celine's image. Celine said goodbye to the young ladies again as they were putting on their coats and gloves. It's time to say goodbye. I look forward to seeing you next time. It was fun. See you again soon at the meeting. I hope the blessings will always be upon Lady Celine, who has come closer to adulthood. The young ladies, who had appeared like the wind, disappeared in the same manner. Only Corinne, who had been the last to leave the mansion, had left a light kiss on Celine's lovely cheek. Celine, who returned to her room, opened and closed the music box she had received as a gift and fell into deep thought. She thought of herself, who had been embarrassed just because the hourglass hadn't been there. She was able to cope with the situation with flexibility and without having to turn time 5 minutes back, but when she had the hourglass with her, she was ruled by it, even to the point of letting herself be embarrassed for a moment. Even though she hadn't used it many times, she felt like she was already being swayed by the power of the hourglass. But, I can't help but use the hourglass. The hourglass next to the music box shone with the reflection of the light. It seemed as if it were doing so to express with its whole make that it was not guilty of anything, and that confused Celine. 'Cause there's nothing as stupid as not using what I have available. So, she thought that if she didn't want to panic like earlier, she should carry it around all the time, instead of trying not to rely on the hourglass. If it was used at the right moment, she wouldn't be dragged around. And it was better to take it with her than to be uncomfortable without it. Yes, it's important to get rid of anxiety. So, Celine crushed a bouquet of flowers that Lyra had given her and put it in the brazier. The bouquet had been the source of her bad mood which had accompanied her anxiety. It was quite worth seeing it lose its shape and contort in the brazier. She stared at it as it lost its shape and turned into a handful of ashes. Behind her, she could hear someone call for her. "Miss, you have a visitor." Thud. Her heart sank. Is he really here? Oscar Frederick. Turning back with somewhat trembling eyes, she saw Jessica, who, like her master, recited the visitor's name with a quivering mouth. Oscar Frederick has come to visit you. The news of Oscar's visit went straight to Lyra's ear. As Celine began to change clothes again to suit his preference for plain garments, Lyra was able to get to the lounge where Oscar was before her. Why did he come to see Celine? What's going on with that cheap, dirty prostitute's daughter? No matter how hard she thought, she found no answer to that question. That was because she couldn't think of any reason why he should meet Celine. She didn't want to imagine the worst possibility that he might be visiting her because of Celine's birthday. While she was wondering what kind of excuse to give to enter the room, she found 2 maids coming into the lounge with trays of refreshments. So, Mila called them up with her unique, sweet smile. Chapter 48. Is there anything I can do to help? Yeah. The cups look heavy. Obviously, 2 sets of teacups could not be heavy. And even if they were heavy, how could they get help from their master? Lyra's maid appeared behind the 2 bewildered maids. Give them to me. I will bring them. Mrs. Emma. The maids with the refreshments turned pale because she was not the kind to do such a thing. Nevertheless, they were unable to refuse their master's and Emma's instructions, and the refreshments soon fell into their hands. Miss, shall we go in? Yes. Lyra, who swallowed hard, entered the lounge with her maid. There was a man sitting there, for whom she longed constantly. Mr. Oscar. Lady Lyra? He looked quite surprised at Lyra, who showed up with tea tray herself. What kind of aristocratic lady does that, forgoing her maids and servants? Lyra, who claimed she did chores, seemed to say that she didn't care about such things. In truth, she was just wondering why he had come to see Celine. It's been a long time, Mr. Oscar. How have you been? How have you been? I have been busy learning embroidery. I see. His eyes followed Lyra's little hands, which laid the teacups on the table clumsily. There was a touch of uneasiness to her, so her maid, Emma, set the teacups right and poured the tea. Lyra smiled like a flower and said, "Can I talk to you until my sister comes?" Oscar couldn't refuse Lyra's presence, so he nodded silently and said, "Sure." Lyra sat elegantly opposite of him and drank the tea Emma had prepared, even though the tea had been prepared for Celine's share. "I think you're a little thin." "I was busy." "Oh, you are having exams soon, aren't you?" "Come to think of it, it's a busy time for the academy." "Yes. But, I guess you've got some important business since you are visiting the Vermont mansion not on a weekend, but on a weekday." "I could say so." There was a small tremor in the cup held by Lyra. After halting her speech for a moment and drinking some tea, Lyra noticed something in the hands of the servant waiting behind him. It was a bouquet of lilies. They had to be for Celine since he had not handed them over to her. "Is it a birthday present?" "Why?" Pure lilies didn't match such a dirty person. She was the only one who could really receive lilies. Lyra closed her eyes once and then opened them. Having been taught to be noble since birth, she knew how to keep her elegance under any circumstance. Even if this was a situation where someone she loved had prepared a bouquet for someone else. "You're very sweet. I guess you're here because it's my sister's birthday." "Unfortunately, the party is already over. I was not invited, so I just gave her a present." So, Lyra reproached Celine with great aloofness. She didn't feign injury, simply emphasizing Celine's fault. "Of course, she didn't invite me because she thought I wasn't feeling well. Actually, it wasn't like that. It's my fault that I didn't properly inform her, but I do feel sorry." Oscar's eyes were briefly shaken by Lyra's words. Lyra noticed Oscar take a moment to think and smiled. Celine was already rumored to be a wicked woman, so she seemed to think he would acknowledge that Celine had not invited her. Excessive criticism was venomous, so Lyra, who aptly faked Celine's story, changed the subject. She kept talking like a little lark at him, who returned half-thoughtless, brief answers to her. "Your vacation will start soon, right? I hope Mr. Oscar will graduate soon as well. That way, we'll be able to see each other often," Lyra added with a deafening voice in her mind. Though inaudible, he nodded quietly and affirmatively. "Yes. So, I think the Academy's vacation is always about the same time as my birthday. My brother, Kane, always brings me a present." Lyra laughed like a fresh flower, perhaps even thinking of his brother. "Well, Mr. Oscar, if you have time. Would you like to come to my birthday party?" Lyra, appearing nervous as if the question was difficult to say, asked in a very low voice. So far, he hadn't attended her parties because he had been busy, so he had simply sent a gift. Since he was visiting Celine on her birthday, he had to visit Lyra on hers. And secondly, though there had been no contact so far, the engagement of the two was being discussed within their families. Thinking that way, Oscar nodded quietly. "All right, let's set a date." "Wow, I'm glad. Then, I'll send you an invitation." Lyra, smiling, expressed her joy while wondering what to do. She had come down angry at the fact that he had come to visit Celine, but she had gained an unexpected boon. Of course, she still didn't know why he had come to visit Celine, but since he said he would also attend her birthday party, which he had not attended, she thought it was not because he was fond of Celine that he was visiting her. There must have been something really important to be done. But, that was a matter to be found out later. "It always snows on my birthday, and I hope it snows again this time." "Oh, it's midwinter, so it'll be very pretty." Lyra, who enjoyed a bit more of the chat with Oscar before Celine arrived, left the lounge with a soft smile as Celine entered while looking embarrassed. Lyra had the demeanor of a victor. Still, Celine, who could not express her disdain, asked Oscar with an expression that meant she didn't know anything. Did I interrupt? Shall I come back in a little while?" "No, please sit down." Oscar beckoned her to sit on the chair opposite of him, the spot where Lyra had been sitting until just now. "What did they talk about?" Lyra must have had a very satisfying conversation since she saw her smiling away even though Lyra knew he had come to visit Celine. Shouldn't I have changed clothes? It was too late, but she regretted it. Celine sat down, and soon, a new teacup was placed in front of her. When she became thirsty and took a sip of the tea, she felt a sweet and soft taste of honey and milk tea. He greeted Celine first in a very gentlemanly manner. "How have you been? Since it's getting cold, it's probably not easy to walk around." "Yes, I've been well. How have you been, Mr. Oscar?" He stopped short of holding his teacup when he saw Celine's smiling face. That was because she had put on her most seductive and charming smile. It looked unbecoming, even though she had turned 15 and was closer to adulthood after her birthday. Nevertheless, it was a very natural and fascinating smile, one he had lost himself to in the dining hall before. The atmosphere changed dramatically, as if it was not the same place where he had chatted with Lyra. Oscar, who looked at Celine for a moment, hurriedly lowered his eyes and stared at the teacup. His answer became short and slow. "Yeah. I'm wearing the hairpin sent by Mr. Oscar. How about it? Does it look good?" He couldn't help but look up at her question. It the exact hairpin he had presented her, so he had to check it out and say a word of praise. He had no choice but to lift his eyes fixed to the teacup and look at Celine. "You look very good. Thank you for giving me this precious gift. It's so pretty that I want to wear it every day." Oscar's heart throbbed again as she smiled sweetly with her eyes. Her seductive smile, which was not easily found among the nobles, and her young age played a part in that. Even though he was not interested in beauty and appearance, he couldn't stand in the face of absolute, experienced temptation and beauty stoically. He averted his gaze again, and the initiative of the conversation fell to Celine in a flash. "Did you not like the brooch I sent you? I thought it would match you well." "No, I loved it very much. It's just too much, so it's a little burdensome." "Oh, I see. You are the first person I've given a gift to, so unknowingly." Although that was the first gift she had given to someone not in the Viermont family since joining the Viermonts, Celine did not have to add such a useless explanation. Chapter 49. The first gift. "Is that really what you mean?" "Yes, I guess that's why I prepared a gift a little too extravagant." He had come to say that they should stop exchanging gifts, but he was speechless and unable to reply as she answered, blushing. "Please don't be burdened. Think of it as a gift from the heart and know that I prepared it because I was very happy to receive yours." In the conversation with her, which was mixed with temptation and pity, Oscar could not say anything, nothing but a positive answer to her simple question. "I wanted to see Mr. Oscar wearing a brooch, but..." "You didn't bring it, did you?" "No, I brought it." He hadn't known she was going to tell a story like that, so he thought he might have had a chance to give it back to Celine. But, instead of giving it back to her and contrary to his intentions, he ended up putting it on in front of her. "Can I pin it to your clothes?" "Yes, please." The brooch the servant who was accompanying him was holding fell in Celine's hands. She slowly narrowed the distance between them. Even though she could put it on without getting too close, she narrowed the space so tightly that he could smell her. As a pretext, she said, "Mr. Oscar is tall, so I can't help it." Despite their significant difference in height, Oscar held his breath and looked away since her scent seemed to be able to reach him when she approached. It took her a long time to attach the brooch to him due to her clumsiness, but Oscar waited for her to put the brooch on him without any complaints or exasperated sighs. "You look great." Celine, who checked on the brooch to see if it was hung right, stepped away from him as if she were satisfied. The blue diamond blended well with his dark suit and shone beautifully. He hadn't come to the mansion for that, but because of Celine, who smiled brightly in front of his eyes, Oscar was unaware of her words and expressed his thanks. "Thank you." "No, I'm glad it looks good on you." The two, who sat down and faced each other again, had nothing more to say, so they drank tea quietly. Unlike Celine, who had a pleasant expression on her face and drank her tea leisurely, Oscar somehow couldn't hide his anxiety. After agonizing for a while because he felt like he had to say something to Celine, he recalled the conversation he had had with Lyra a little while ago. Today was Celine's birthday. So, he had been contemplating the reason she had called him that day, but as soon as he caught sight of her charming figure, the idea vanished from his mind like the wind. I heard today is your birthday. Yes, it is. I had a small party with other young ladies, with whom I made friends with for the first time. It would have been good if Mr. Oscar had come as well. That was a shame. Oh, I'm sorry I'm late. He had not been invited to the party, but he felt like he had to apologize when facing her honest regrets. If he had known it was her birthday, he would have prepared a present. He went there to talk about not exchanging gifts anymore, so he had a formal bouquet of flowers prepared. It took him a while to bring up her birthday, and he had simply handed over a bouquet of flowers after receiving that luxurious brooch, so the whole exchange made him feel a bit shameless. Nevertheless, he gave the bouquet of lilies to Celine because he had not prepared anything else for her. Quite rightly, Celine received it happily. Thank you very much. What a beautiful bouquet. It's too bad it'll wither eventually. I'm sorry for preparing just a bouquet of lilies. If I'd known. Just? No, it's a very precious bouquet for me. Celine held the bouquet of flowers in her arms and took in its scent as if it were really precious. Oscar, who still couldn't hide his apologetic demeanor, added he would prepare something if there were any other gifts she wanted. Then, Celine, who was enjoying the fragrance of the flower, an innocent, girlish expression on her face, raised her head and faced Oscar, who was staring at her. Then, I'm sorry, but can I ask you for a favor? Yes, as much as you like. I don't need a gift, so could you be my pen pal? Pen pal. You mean? Yes, I'm always alone because I don't have any friends. I guess it's because I'm not originally from nobility. On top of that, I have a lot to learn. But right now, I'm a little lonely. The request was made as if it were simple. It was only an exchange of letters. However, the words about the engagement with her younger sister had come and gone, so that forced him to be cautious. If he did something wrong, he could be misunderstood. As if she sensed Oscar's troubles, she immediately changed her words, saying, if you feel pressured by that, you don't have to do it. Yeah, let's turn it down. It's a tiny, little thing, but I don't know what the repercussions will be after that. But as soon as he thought about his answer and tried to say it, he saw Celine touching her eyes from the other side of the table. Oh, I'm sorry to bother you. It's just that I feel everything has been strange and a little bit lonely since my mother remarried. It's been a long time since I had such a good conversation. In fact, it hasn't been long since I started talking to the young ladies, so I felt a little uncomfortable at today's party. Hearing her words, Oscar could not utter a firm refusal. Who can give a cold refusal to a small, tender young lady with teary eyes? I'm sure Lyra would be upset because she has a good relationship with you, right? Oscar could not answer that simple question. Why? Is it because I really get along with Lyra? No, Celine was not asking if a good relationship was a close relationship. Oscar looked at Celine's face in silence again this time, having difficulty answering her, and she opened her mouth again, a vigorless expression on her face. I must have brought up something I shouldn't have. Please, forget what I just said. No. No man would be able to refuse her when she looked like that. He was about to say no, but that answer melted away in the spring breeze. Instead, what struck him in his mind was that it would be okay if he occasionally sent her letters. It's fine because they'll be letters between friends. Lady Lyra has a big heart, so I think she'll understand. If it became known, it could become an issue even between the two families and not just for Lyra, but in this moment, it didn't feel like it would be that much trouble. That was because they would be just letters between friends. Thank you, Mr. Oscar. Celine's reddened eyes blinked finely, creating a smooth silhouette that made his mind even more firm. The hourglass was not almighty. There was a limit to its power. It was very useful when it came to getting information or doing bad things, but it simply didn't do much to convince others. It was just one more option. Recalling that the idea of exchanging letters with Oscar had almost gone wrong, Celine wrote her first letter to Oscar as a friend. When he had first refused, she had turned the hourglass over and rewound that moment, acting like a pitiful lady in her next try. However, if she had done it wrong the second time, it would have been all for nothing. Jessica, seal the letter and deliver it to Oscar. Celine, who gave Jessica a trifling letter about the lilies he had given and the weather, was again lost in thought. There was another problem with the hourglass. It was difficult to guess the time precisely. It certainly rewound time by 5 minutes, and it was very convenient if she measured the time correctly, but if she forgot the time when things went awry or had to use the hourglass in the absence of a clock, she could make a mistake because she couldn't measure the time exactly. Chapter 50. I think I should order a watch that returns the hands to the exact same place every 5 minutes, unlike the usual clocks, where the hour hand and the minute hand meet at the top after 12 hours. She thought it would be good if the hands were to start moving when she pressed a button and stopped at the top in 5 minutes. She felt a need for it when she missed the timing while testing the hourglass on Jessica. She mistook the time, delaying the activation, and the conversation went awry. Even though she turned the hourglass over, Jessica asked, "What do you mean, miss?" She remembered that her heart sank when that happened, so it was fortunate that she didn't say anything important. As a result, Jessica advised her several times to call a doctor to see if there was something to be concerned about. There were also the words that Celine had said, from which she could not run away. "I feel like I'm losing my life by using it, but I can't help it." Let's get started. "Miss, I'm getting worried because you say you're losing your life. You sleep too long. It's presumptuous, but I think it's better to call a doctor," Jessica, who had already given the letter to the servant and come back, said while pouring the warm tea. Celine waved dismissively again at her today. "I'm okay. But I think you are losing weight." "What are you talking about?" "I'm taller and I've put on weight." "Not as far as I can see." Jessica was stubborn even though she looked a little scared. It was her character, so Celine couldn't help it. Celine was not as angry like she had been before, and Jessica's stubbornness, which would have ended almost immediately, increased by 2 or 3-fold, and that annoyed Celine. She'd rather be examined by a doctor than listen to any more nagging. "All right. Bring him in." In order to prevent Jessica's nagging and because Celine was a little worried about her body, she decided it was better to see a doctor after all. Fortunately, her examination with the family doctor yielded nothing wrong. She was told to be careful because she was rather physically weak, but after the examination, Celine rebuked Jessica in high spirits. "Don't tell me to call a doctor anymore." "Yes, miss." Still, Jessica looked very happy because she had confirmed that Celine was healthy. Celine was also relieved of her mental burden. Even though the doctor did not have all of the information, she was relieved since he had said she was in good condition at the moment. Celine had refused to see the family doctor many times, but in the end, it seemed right to do as Jessica said. If Celine had listened to Jessica like this in the past, she wouldn't have died. No matter how hard she protested, the Jessica in the past had not been able to read the situation. She had been that way. She had not been able to distinguish the time and place to bring attention to her master, insisting only on what she thought was right for her ghost-like master, and that had not worked. Rather, it had only procked Celine's anger. But now, things were different. Jessica was just as stubborn as in the past, but this time, Celine didn't know why, but Jessica had become so quick-witted that she could measure the timing of her protests. So, Celine was satisfied with her in many ways, and she wanted to give Jessica a reward. "So, I haven't given her a brooch yet because I've been busy with a lot of things pertaining to the hourglass and my birthday." Celine was going to present one of the brooches from the jewelry store to Jessica. She didn't mean to overly thank her. It was just a bait to bring in new people to her side. It was meant to show that riches would come to those who tended to her. The gold brooch was worth it. Moreover, everyone wearing ornaments of the same shape helped form a sense of unity and belonging between the wearers. Depending on the number of brooches, she could have them feel a difference in bonding, and that was convenient. In society, where infighting was prevalent, things like that were often used to build factions. Celine had the brooches made to be used that way. "I've figured out the power of the hourglass. Let's move now." Celine, who took a brooch from the drawer, slowly approached Jessica. After closing the window that had been opened for ventilation and arranging the drapes, Jessica was suddenly surprised by Celine's approach and clung to the drapes. Celine laughed out loud when she saw Jessica's reaction. "What are you so surprised about?" "Oh, no. You suddenly showed up and... Do you think I'm going to eat you?" "Well, it's not like that." The little bird, anxious to be eaten by its little beast, was at a loss for where to look. "I wish you could stop shivering now." It was clear that no matter how much she imitated Lyra, her actions would be misunderstood as harassing her maid behind the scenes. "I don't mean to bother you, but sometimes I want to." Celine felt like she was a carnivorous animal chasing her prey. That was why she wanted to bother her. If Jessica kept making Celine excited, the hidden wicked woman might be able to emerge from her. If the wicked woman came out, everything would go wrong. "Jessica, I like you more than you think." "Yeah?" Jessica's body became more and more rigid by the sudden confession. It would have been better if Celine had said no. Jessica's eyes were as wobbly as reeds fluttering in the wind as the words she had never thought of hearing struck her. "Do you think I could keep you by my side for so long if I didn't like you? And why are you so stiff? Did I bother you too much?" Contrary to Celine's intentions, Jessica was unfortunately able to recall the tens of thousands of acts that Celine had inflicted on her. Celine burst into laughter when she realized that. "Oh, of course. I wouldn't deny what I did in the past. I was immature. But I recently realized that those actions were wrong. You know that, don't you?" Jessica nodded as she moved her stiff neck. It was true that Celine's behavior had changed drastically from the summer. It had suddenly become too different to just be maturity, but she was different. "I think that everyone can change like that. We repent for our past mistakes, and we move on to the right path," Celine said, recalling what had been written in the book she had just read. Of course, there were people like Lyra, who lived their whole lives like garbage without repentance for their pasts and presents. Celine also pretended to be a good girl outwardly, but within, she still thought about ruining someone else's life, so she couldn't say that she was on the right path. Anyway, the public would do that for her. When someone said and did something morally wrong, eventually, they knelt down in front of an idol of God and admitted their sins and repented. Celine didn't know whether they truly repented or reflected on themselves, but on the surface anyway, most of the people did so. So, there's nothing to be afraid of. I know I was wrong in the past. I was very wrong because I was stupid enough to show my true colors and act simple. And as I said again and again, "I like you," said Celine, pinning a brooch to Jessica's chest. The gold, which reflected the light and shone brilliantly, matched Jessica's garment very well. "Oh, miss. This is... It's a gift for you. It also means sorry and remorse for what I've done so far." As a mere gift to a maid, it was too much. Jessica's face contorted strangely, and there was no way to tell if she was laughing or crying. It seemed that she didn't know how to deal with the situation at that moment. "Don't feel burdened. It's something you can take. I really want you to wear this brooch, so that everyone can see and be envious of it." Celine, who patted her on the shoulder a couple of times, returned to the sofa and drank some tea gracefully. Chapter 51. After a while of hearing no sound, she glanced up to confirm that Jessica was there, while Jessica was just looking down at the beautiful, shiny brooch on her chest. As if she could not even think about touching it, her hands were hovering poorly above it. Celine called out for Jessica to break her from that state. "Jessica, please go to the jewelry store." "The jewelry store?" "Yes, I'm thinking of ordering a watch." She was going to order the 5-minute stopwatch that she had thought of earlier. It was a custom watch, so even though any engineer could make it, she decided to let them make it as a pretty watch so that she could carry it with her always and anywhere. Jewelers sold all kinds of high-end items adorned in all kinds of jewels. They also dealt with designers and other types of engineers. So, the only place that could satisfy her wishes was the jewelry shop. "Tell the owner that I want a watch that runs for 5 minutes when I press a button. And that I'll carry it on me at all times." Should I just say that? Yes. Please ask him to bring the designs to the mansion later. Yes, miss. Jessica, who had something to do, hurried out to the busy street. Corinne's class was scheduled for later, so she had to come back quickly. Celine sat on the sofa again, holding a book and thinking while seeing the wagon her attendant was using getting smaller and smaller. It was my birthday a while ago, so I could say I bought it as a souvenir. She had spent quite a bit of money in the Viermont's name to produce Oscar's gift and the golden brooches. She didn't want to be seen as extravagant, so she decided to make an excuse for the stopwatch. Well, she had made a big contribution to her father's business in fur, which hadn't existed in his previous life, so he would give her such a birthday present with a smile. Should I put the hourglass in a box and carry it around? It would be easier to put it in a box because it was a little too bulky to carry freely. In addition, there was the risk of breaking if she just carried it around and dropped it, so she needed a hard case. Anyway, the box made by the owner of the general store was perfect. The shape was sufficient. There was no need to make a new case because it was clear that Jessica would carry it as she did now. While she was lost in thought, time went by, and suddenly, she could hear the sound of a carriage outside the window. Because the carriage had stopped in front of the mansion, it seemed to be from a visitor. When Celine opened the window and stuck her head out, she saw Corinne in all her benevolence. Celine waved her hand eagerly and welcomed her enthusiastically. Like always, Corinne also raised her head and turned to Celine's room, and the two shared the joy of their reunion with smiles. Corinne. Lady Celine. Today, again, Celine went down to the first floor in a hurry to greet her. While showing off her friendship in the hall for a moment, she recalled that Jessica was out because no maid had followed her as usual. Oh, what do I do? My only maid is out. There was no one to serve tea for Corinne and herself. Because of this, she had to request another maid to take Jessica's place. Celine looked through all the maids around the hall. They were all bowing at her. Who's good? It didn't matter much who served the tea anyway, but she thought it would be better to take this opportunity to choose a maid who she could bring to her side. If she kept things like in the past, Lyra would send her maids to her. What about that freckled maid? She was Celine's first target. She was the maid who seemed to have a strong appetite for things. She was envious of even the gifts her master received, so she thought she would be able to enslave her easily. But Celine looked around the hall again, and unfortunately, the maid was not there. It didn't seem like an opportunity. Celine pointed to a maid who appeared to be one of Lyra's after looking around for a bit. My only maid is out, so can you get me tea? Yes, miss. As if unwilling, the maid replied with a very stiff expression. Even if you feel that way, what can you do? No matter how much she hated it, the maid couldn't refuse her master's order. She just had to shut up and do as she was told. While Corinne and Celine went upstairs to talk about their lives, the maid brought tea and snacks. She was impeccably well educated, and it was a perfect serving. The tea smells good. What kind of tea is it? It's lavender tea. Really? It's a little different from the lavender tea Jessica made for me. If you're not busy, would you stand by and serve me a little until my maid returns? It was a maid's job to change the tea when it went cold or if the refreshments ran out. Besides, Celine didn't know when and what kind of help she might need. Had she been alone, she might not have needed the help of a maid. However, it was a bit shameful to not call for a maid when she had a guest. Lyra's maid spoke of her situation with a very sad face. I'm actually in the middle of what Miss Lyra asked me to do, so may I send another maid for you? Celine shrugged. It didn't matter much. She couldn't stop the maid from doing her job like a witch or yell at the maid to serve her instead. So, as she was about to answer, the hourglass popped into her mind. Originally, she had had no plans to use it that day, but she would use it now. What time is it now? Celine, who measured the time roughly, drank the tea silently until Corinne, who was on the other side of the table between them, expressed concern. Celine, after taking that little time, nodded. Okay. Well, you have to do it. By the way, I have a few questions. Yes, miss. Do you know of a maid with a lot of freckles on her face among Lyra's maids? Oh, yes. What's her name? Her name is Annie. How old is she? She's 15 years old. When did she come to the mansion? As far as I know, it's been 5 years. That's more than I thought. She came in when she was pretty young. The maid's face became more and more stiff as Celine continued with her useless questions. Then, she is the youngest among Lyra's maids? Yes, Annie is the youngest of the maids in the mansion. Really? Is Annie free now? I don't know about that. Okay, thanks. Can you bring me the hourglass in the cabinet? You can go out after that. Yes, miss. The maid wanted to get out of there as soon as possible, so she brought the hourglass over very quickly. Then, she immediately said goodbye to Celine and left her room. Celine turned the hourglass over after she checked the clock and thought it was about time. Then, the maid, who had just gone out, appeared before the door of the room, standing politely with her hands together. Celine smiled softly. Are you busy? Yes. You go, then. I'm sorry, but could you send me a maid to replace you? There's not much to do, so I would gladly take the youngest maid in the mansion. Bring the overly freckled Annie. Poor little lamb falls into the hands of a wicked woman. It's getting very cold, teacher. That's right. It looks like it's going to snow soon. If it snows, I'll go see the lake. The lakeside where snow piles up is quite the sight. Shall we go together? It would be perfect. Celine and Corinne grinned at each other as they talked about trivial things. Chapter 52. You look pretty cold too. Annie shook her head, surprised by Celine's sudden statement. Oh, no. I'm fine. Really? You must be strong in the cold. Well, that's right. Regardless, I'm afraid you'll catch a cold if you don't put anything on. It's all right. The maid looked very uncomfortable in the position she was in now. She had not expected to serve Celine, and Celine had also never imagined that such an opportunity would come. It would not have happened without the hourglass. Corinne smiled softly while looking at Celine, who was taking care of even her maid. Do you mind if I do something different today, teacher? Something new? Yes. I'm looking forward to your social debut at the year's end, so I think we should rehearse. That way, Annie will start to envy me. Greedy. She seems very interested in that. That's a good idea. With Corinne's consent, Celine learned how to walk gracefully in her pointed shoes, how to gently fan herself, and how to respond to her escort. Annie watched it from start to finish. Her eyes glistened with envy. It was a world unknown to her, which she would never experience in her life. So, if you give up early, your life will be smooth, but you can't hide your greed, so this wicked bitch will extend her hands to you. Finally, when checking the dance steps, Corinne's eyes widened, and she said, Oh, I think you're better than me. Your compliment is too much. I guess it's thanks to the fact that I've been practicing alone. The moves that Corinne and she practiced were very easy and simple for Celine, who had used to party all the time. In those days, she had only thought about making herself attractive to others. Of course, all of the moves were meant to accentuate beauty, not to express grace, so they had to be accompanied by the etiquette that she had learned and practiced from Corinne. Fortunately, it wasn't that difficult. All she had to do was stop any indecent laughs, which naturally came out of her. By the time they were about to start the dancing practice, with either one taking the role of man or woman at a time, Jessica returned from her errand. She hurriedly replaced Annie, her face flushed as she seemed to have run out of breath on her way to the 3rd floor. Annie left Celine's room with a look of regret because she couldn't watch the dance that was about to start now in earnest. At last, Celine saw that Annie's eyes went to the golden brooch on Jessica's chest. I'm sure you're wondering. Let's give her a little time to imagine all kinds of things. Celine burst into childish laughter and gave Jessica a cup of water. Me miss. You didn't have to be in such a hurry. I felt sorry to see your face so flushed and poured the water without realizing it. Take it. Thank you. There's nothing to do, so you can rest. Right, teacher? Yes, I'm afraid she's going to faint like that. Jessica's face was glistening so much that it would be strange for her to collapse right there. After taking the glass of water, Jessica watched the class quietly drinking it in the corner. Annie's return eliminated the need to continue that tedious dance practice, so the class ended quickly. Celine, who was watching Corinne's carriage leave for a moment, asked Jessica if she had done well and what she had asked Jessica to do. Yes, miss. He decided to bring a design and samples in a few days. A few days had passed, as she had said, and a drawing and 6 samples of the watch Celine had asked for from the jeweler arrived. The owner of the jewelry brought it in person. The watch, which was composed of colorful jewels and craftsmanship, seemed suitable to be used as a pendant for a long necklace. Celine was agonizing over the 6 samples in front of her. I'm worried because everything's beautiful. Jessica, which one do you think is best? Me? Jessica, who had been called by name, hesitated to answer in surprise. Why is she not brave with that? Well, she had been subservient her entire life, but Celine still didn't like Jessica to be surprised by everything even though Celine had already warned her about that. I'll take the first sample because it's more refined. That's an excellent choice. It was a pocket watch with opal, rainbow lily set on it. The diamond that decorated the inside of the watch looked alright, but the craftwork on the rim was exquisite and much more valuable than jewels. Of course, that was only an unfinished sample, so the real one would be a little different, but she had the impression that it might be a lot better than this. Like she had expected, the finished work she received about a week later was much more luxurious and beautiful than the sample. It was a beautiful pocket clock that could also act as a pendant to hand from a necklace. When would be a good time to start? The ability of the hourglass and the tool to make proper use of it were ready to drive Lyra into the depths of despair. Would her birthday be good, or should I steal her maid first? Either way, it was certain that Lyra's future would not be smooth. Celine did not have to agonize over the first use of her pocket watch. Much to her regret, Lyra recommended some of her maids to Celine. It seemed a little early, it was still before the end of the year, but perhaps Oscar's visit had been the trigger. That must have been why she had shown up at the dining hall when she hadn't even shown her face since his visit and eaten with her ears pricked up. How stupid you are. Lyra had probably sent her maid because she hadn't gotten any information. Celine did not miss this opportunity and took in Lyra's maid. Lyra had recommended Annie because Celine didn't need a lot of maids yet, but at the very least, she needed a maid to do all the chores. It wasn't as if Lyra had decided on Annie at first. Only after Celine had used the hourglass to return to the past and posited that it would be good for the young maid to serve her had the maid been assigned to her. So, without having to choose, she used the pocket watch for the first time to bring Annie into her service. Unlike Jessica, who took a short break when Celine was absorbed in a book, Annie followed Celine wherever she went, from morning to night, in the name of an immediate, quick response. Celine assumed that Lyra had instructed her to do that. She was certain that Lyra couldn't even sleep because of wondering what Celine and Oscar had talked about. And so, Annie's actions were to drive Celine, the thorn in her eyes, into an abyss. Annie, will you change the tea? Yes, miss. When she gave the order without taking her eyes off the book, Annie brought some new tea right away. It seemed to have been prepared in advance. No matter how young you are, you're Lyra's maid. Annie was more capable than she had thought. Even though she was young, she had worked as a maid for a long time. In addition, everyone in the mansion was a close associate of the beloved Lyra. There was no way that she would not be competent. Celine, who observed her pouring the tea politely nearby, spoke to her with a face that Annie found something very strange. How nice your skin is. Yes? You have freckles, so I didn't notice from afar, but your skin is very white and fine. Annie's face turned red when Celine suddenly praised her skin. Driven by hunger, Celine's praise continued. You have big eyes, a sharp nose, and fair skin. If you dress well, you'll be called a noblewoman. Annie didn't respond to that series of compliments. She just blushed and looked at the floor. That was because Celine and she did not have a good relationship yet. In addition, Celine had been abusive to her master, Lyra. She had been born the daughter of a prostitute, who was worse than a commoner, and had been lucky enough to become a noblewoman, so Annie had been busy cursing her birth, thinking Celine was different from the real nobles. Surprisingly, Celine began to extol her, so it was only natural that she didn't know what to say. Chapter 53. Then, Celine rose from her seat and stroked Annie's cheek as she lowered her head. She wasn't speaking lies. Rather, Annie's skin was well maintained for a commoner. It felt like she might have invested all of the money she had earned working as a maid on it. She seemed more interested in dressing herself than Celine had thought. And that was a great opportunity. I don't have any other classes today, so why don't we play for a while? Annie opened her round eyes to see if Celine was speaking to her. Of course, she was. Celine grabbed her hand, asking why she was dawdling, and sat her down in front of the dressing table. Miss? I feel bad because you have good skin, but it's covered in freckles. Celine took out the cosmetics that had never been used and had been placed deep in the drawer. She had never used those products after she had returned to the past on purpose. However, they had helped her dress up every day in the past, so she knew how to use them very well. There are only a few now, but for Annie, it'll look amazing enough to turn others' eyes toward her, just like they turned to me in the past. Since Celine was still young, she had received only cosmetics for formal occasions, and she did not have many types of cosmetics, but they were enough to make Annie look good. Yip, it's cold. Annie raised her voice when Celine meticulously applied the sticky, plant extract lotion to her face. Soon, however, she was stunned into silence when she saw her face glossy through the mirror before her eyes. After tidying up the skin, Celine applied the ground pearl powder to her face and trimmed her eyebrows. Finally, after breathing life into both cheeks, Celine applied red pigment to her lips to finish her makeup. How do you like it? Is it really me? That's what I thought. If you cover your freckles, your figure will come to life. Annie looked at herself in the mirror without blinking her eyes. She seemed unable to take her eyes off of her distinctly different appearance. Celine whispered, gently combing Annie's hair, I don't use them, so you can use them if you want. What? These cosmetics. I'm still young and have no freckles, so I don't have to use them. So, you can use them. The cosmetics Celine had used on Annie were things common people would never have. The high price was one of the reasons, but their sales were limited to the nobility from the start. The quality of cosmetics was different from those used by ordinary people. Unlike the ones that contained lead, which decayed the skin the more they were used, they did not ruin the user's skin since they mixed natural extracts and fine soils into them. Annie, who had secretly stolen Lyra's cosmetics a few times, had experienced that. However, Celine had said that it was okay for her to use such high-quality products. Am I dreaming? It's not very expensive for me, and I can get them again if I ask. And if I have such a pretty maid of whom I can be proud. Annie still looked dazed. She hadn't had a sudden rise in status like Celine, so she hadn't expected to ever be able to acquire them, but the cosmetics had suddenly fallen on her lap. Celine, who even brushed Annie's hair, took a little hairpin out of the dressing room and put it on her hair. There was no special gem on it, but the red ribbon hairpin was cute. Only then did Celine, who had a satisfied expression, stroke Annie on the cheek. It's late, but this hairpin is a gift for being my maid. I should give you a golden brooch, like Jessica's, but... Annie's eyes widened at the words, a golden brooch. Even though she had purposely avoided looking at it recently, the image of it remained in her mind. She had heard that Celine had given it to Jessica, but she had never thought that Celine would give it to her, so she pricked up her ears and waited for the words to come. I can't do that because you haven't done anything yet. Jessica's been waiting on me for quite some time, so she was worth it, but you, Celine's eyes, as she maintained her gentle smile, turned sharp at once. You haven't done anything yet, have you? Ah. Somehow Annie's eyes were shaken by the prickly speech. Oh, don't misunderstand. I'm not asking you to do anything. In other words, trust should be built up. I don't know you yet. Everything is the same, isn't it? It certainly meant I've done nothing, but why did it sound so different? Annie didn't know why, but she couldn't help nodding. Celine, content with how docile Annie was, took her hand, showing Annie the face of pure joy of an innocent girl her age. Well, then, since it's been a long time since you've decorated yourself like a noble lady, why don't you practice having a tea party? You'll be following me to a meeting soon. After spending that time on Annie's makeup, Celine lent her some of her own clothes. The garment was one of the ones that had been bought from a boutique used by the common people, but it was better than the maid's gray uniform. It was a modest dress Annie herself could have bought, but Annie failed to erase Celine's touch from her skin, as if she was already plenty satisfied with what she had gotten. Both were of humble birth, but one was a noblewoman now, though ostensibly so. Annie couldn't believe that she was drinking tea with Celine like that. She felt like she had everything she ever wanted while savoring Jessica's tea. It's a little awkward, but you're pretty good at it. Thank you, miss. In fact, Annie performed her natural moves in such a way that showed she might have practiced alone. Celine's praise brought a shy smile to Annie's face. Of course, it's a little insufficient to really attend a young lady's tea party, especially the use of your wrist. It's stiff. Now, imitate me. Ah. Annie bit her lip, looking down at Celine's graceful hand movements and then at her own stiff wrist. She couldn't hide her little clumsiness because she hadn't learned it from anyone. All she had known was what she had seen when she had followed Lyra. But, if you keep practicing with me like this, it'll be pretty good. It's all about experience, isn't it? Why yes. Miss. Go and take the rest of the day off. There's nothing else to do, and Jessica's enough for serving tea. Don't forget what you learned today and try to practice. Celine added in a hushed voice, you never know when there might be another case like my mother's. When practice ended, the table was cleaned up right away. Annie disappeared from Celine's room with a puffed-out chest and a dream. Celine mocked Annie as she recalled her expression, which had been unlike usual. It was a little annoying making sure she'd be the one assigned to me, but like I imagined, she's a very easy kid, so I didn't have to use my hourglass at all. Will Mila learn of this in a dream, that the maid she sent is falling for my shallow tricks and flashing her eyes? Foolish. Annie won't even be able to sleep with that bloated dream of hers that'll never come true. Of course, according to Annie's behavior, it wouldn't be difficult to introduce her to a poor noble. If making her his wife was hard, she could always become his concubine. Anyway, Annie's a good prey to roast and swing around. Celine becoming victim to the traps Lyra's maids had created in the past had been decisive for the events that brought about her death. Having removed that possibility, she foresaw that whatever she did in the future would not hurt her at all. Celine was willing to play the noblewoman game with Annie for a few days. She helped the maid dress up, had pretended tea parties with her in the garden, and took her along to the classes with the noble wives. Of course, all she had been able to do was pour tea and listen, but Annie had listened seriously, as if her whole world had been that. Did you learn a lot in class today? Yes. Oh, my God, I'd never known that there were so many manners to abide by in society, Annie answered with her cheeks flushed. Chapter 54. The tea was still warm, but Annie frequently poured some new tea without giving it a chance to cool down. She was probably anxious to gain another favor from Celine, who smiled a little and picked up the tart Baroness Serby had brought as a gift and handed it to her. Miss. Eat. Boobut. How dare I eat the precious cake brought as a gift? Even Celine had not yet eaten a bite of it yet. If she had been dealing with what was left, it could have been done. However, the master who she served was right in front of her, and it was hard for her to imagine herself eating with her master. If you're going to attend parties or meetings, you will have to eat something with me. What's your concern? Unlike Annie, who was stumped, Celine seemed not to care about it at all. Annie had heard that she was going to a party with Celine several times, but that had never crossed her mind. Isn't that what a noble-born, playmate maid does? Nevertheless, Annie picked up the tart and took it into her mouth. The sweetness that spread through her mouth almost made her cry, but she recalled being warned by Celine of it, so she hid her expression as much as she could and swallowed the tart. "You're really good now. It's enough to take you to a meeting." "Thank you, miss." "Will Celine really take me to a meeting?" That was Annie's biggest concern. Obviously, when she thought about it, there was no possible way, but she had lost her soul to the sweet things that Celine had given her. She shouldn't do this. She knew it, but she couldn't help it. There was no way she could think of anything else while Celine was dangling those jewels right in front of her eyes. However, she couldn't get away from the mansion's de facto leader, Lyra, and her head was swirling with what kind of false report to make that day. So, it will soon be Lyra's birthday. Yes. Annie came to her senses when Lyra's name came out of Celine's mouth, since she was having a satisfying day by Celine's side, contrary to Lyra's instructions to help the wicked woman destroy herself. Are her preparations going well? Well, I don't know. Really? It's been a long time, so I thought I'd take you. Don't you think it's more comfortable to be around people you are acquainted with than around those you've never seen before? Annie's eyes widened at her statement. Does Celine really mean to take me with her? Her heart was pounding, and she couldn't say anything. I can't help it if you don't know. I have to put it off for another time. At the moment, Annie almost said that the arrangements for Lyra's birthday party were progressing very smoothly, but she managed to put up with it and swallow to keep the words from spilling out. My master is Miss Lyra, not Celine, a humble bitch, she said to herself. Celine waved Annie off when she saw her dull expression, realizing that she wasn't ready to confide in her yet. You should go now. Call Jessica. Jessica had been resting for days out of Celine's consideration. Indeed, Jessica had been cleared up since Celine was molding Annie, but Jessica's days had been uneasy. She had not known what to do with her extended time off. Annie's back became drenched with cold sweat when she was asked to call Jessica. She had to step back now, but she had become impatient because she was afraid that everything she had just enjoyed would go to others. Celine, looking back at Annie, who was biting her lips without an answer, ordered Jessica to be called back again. Yes, miss. In the end, Annie's choice was Lyra. Instead of creating unnecessary misunderstandings, Annie chose to nip the events in the bud. She could come up with an excuse for her presence elsewhere, but she couldn't do it on Lyra's birthday, which was unlike anything else. Celine also swallowed a bitter smile as she watched Annie step back quietly. Not yet. She wasn't ready yet. A few days later, Lyra's birthday came around. The mansion was in an uproar as they were busily preparing for guests since dawn. So, Celine, whose eyes were open early in the morning, sat by the window, drank some warm tea and looked outside. The gifts are really colorful. It was an image she had often seen before, but it was new every time she saw it. Celine had never had such an experience. While watching the colorful boxes coming off the wagon, she was still wondering about what was in them. Jessica wriggled her fingers behind Celine's back, expressing uneasiness. These days, Celine was definitely different, but she didn't know when Celine would become anxious and angry again. Fortunately, Celine did not do anything mischievous. She just silently observed what Lyra was receiving. The thought of taking all those things away one day made her apply strength to the hand that held the teacup. Now was the time to persevere. Everything was supposed to come back to her anyway. Unlike in that stupid past, she not only knew the future but she had the hourglass. It wouldn't be bad if I humiliated her with the hourglass. She had not received an invitation, but when thinking of Lyra's personality and because she was family, it wouldn't be a problem for her to attend the party unexpectedly. Of course, she had to endure the ungrateful gazes of those who loved Lyra, but the way they looked at her caused her no problems. I'm more concerned with a reply not coming from Oscar. It didn't take too long to get back and forth from the academy, but Celine, who had sent her first letter as a friend, hadn't received a reply yet. There was no way he wouldn't keep his promise, and since she had so bewitched him, he would send it eventually. However, she was worried that he might have come to his senses. If so, I'll have to lure him again. This time, he won't get away from me. Imaging this and that, Celine adorned herself beautifully. She decorated herself moderately so as not to bring too much attention to herself, but as not to be overlooked either. Even though she was still young, she had a wonderful appearance, so she would be able to catch everyone's attention even if she didn't decorate herself gorgeously. That was one of her specialties. There was a spontaneous outpouring of admiration from Jessica, who combed Celine's hair. Celine was enjoying the benefits of being a member of the Vermont family and having a comfortable life. As a result, she had grown very beautiful since she was growing taller and more mature. Jessica didn't notice it much because she saw Celine every day, but she was so fascinating that others' eyes naturally turned toward her. Of course, that was to be expected for a girl of her age, but it was a significant growth for her, who had been small enough to look the same age as Lyra. Now that Celine had started to grow, Jessica was sure that Celine would join the adults soon. Everyone was so busy that she simply finished her breakfast and went to read a book in her room, waiting for Lyra's birthday party to begin. It would be better to be as abrupt as Lyra had been in her party. If she showed up clumsily and pathetically, even those in Lyra's camp would be filled with sympathy for her. With such a pleasant image in her mind, she closed the book and looked out the window. She could see a familiar carriage from afar. It was the carriage of the Vermont family, lilies etched all over it. It was a strong, large carriage that was a little different from the daily carriage. This one was fit for both luggage and people, for bulk loading, and for long trips. The only one who can ride that carriage is the Count. It was a perfect winter, and it was about time he came back, but she never dreamed he'd come back on Lyra's birthday. If the Count had indeed returned on Lyra's birthday, Celine became a bit miserable even though she was only his stepdaughter. Celine stared at the Count, who got off the carriage and held his own daughter in his arms. She knew that she had a long way to go and that she was discriminated against, but somehow, the loneliness that she had felt in the past hit her all over. Why? Chapter 55. What a tearful paternal love. It was a love Celine had never felt. Lyra had the only being who loved and cared for her. Celine believed that such a thing could not exist. Even the Countess, who was her biological mother, was busy living her life, so she could not afford to take care of Celine. All the men of the past were so bewitched by Celine's appearance that they had seemed to give her all their fortunes, but later, they had left in search of their station. In the end, there had been no man who had devoted himself to her and had dedicated everything to her from beginning to end. If their lives are in danger, it's useless. Celine had not believed in love, even in the love between mother and daughter. So, she had made use of it. She had been confident to using it. There had been nothing easier for her than knowing that love had no substance. The Count had not returned alone. He was with a handsome young man in his early to mid-20s. Celine had just reached the first floor when she saw him greeting Lyra. He introduced himself with a cheerful laugh as a common noble from a faraway province. "I'm Pinot Lane. Please, feel free to call me Lane." With a surname she had never heard of before, he was paying excessive attention to Lyra. Celine didn't know if he was looking for a rise in status or background, but he clearly wanted something. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought such a huge gift. Lane presented a variety of jewels and rare ornaments to Lyra. They looked very expensive to have been prepared by a common noble from a faraway province. When Lyra's eyes widened by the weight of it all, he said, "Don't mind them because I didn't prepare them. They were prepared by my master." Nor did the Count show any signs of discomfort or stop him as he paid great attention to Lyra. He just patted Lane's back, saying he had helped his business in many ways. Lane grinned, saying, "They were just my master's orders." Celine felt uncomfortable and reluctant when meeting someone she had never seen before for the first time, even when it was a hyena looking for scraps, unlike in the past. "You have a daughter as beautiful as the stories. I don't know about anything else, but the rumors about Lyra are no exaggeration. Those compliments are too much." Celine had to watch the scene as they repeatedly praised Lyra, who was in between them. "Wait a minute. I've seen that dress before." Celine was able to realize the origin of Lyra's dress after taking some time to think. "It's similar to the dress Oscar gave me." "Don't tell me. Did he give similar clothes to a girl, whom he would be marrying later, and her elder sister?" Celine swallowed a sneer, thinking he was really insensitive. Meanwhile, Lane, who had been complimenting Lyra to the extent his mouth had gone dry, finally turned to meet Celine. With his attention concentrated on Lyra, he seemed not to have noticed Celine's arrival, so there was wonder on his face. When the Count introduced Celine to him as his other daughter, a slightly perplexed expression and form of speech came from him, unlike just a moment ago when he had made use of his leech-like mouth. "Oh, really? You have a beautiful daughter." Celine read the truth from the man's speech and expression. They were different from what he had shown Lyra. If Lyra was a likely beauty among nobles, Celine was a beauty that had started as a commoner and was not easily found among nobles. She was a real beauty, who would seduce men and women, regardless of their sexes, if she had a mind to do it. She knew it was useless, but Celine couldn't resist showing her unique, charming smile. "Is it because the Count is here? Or is it a gallant spirit?" At any rate, she smiled at Lane, throwing her erotic scent with a highly competitive spirit that she didn't know from where it had come. Celine saw clearly that his eyes shook, though it was only for a moment. After that instant, Lane gazed back at Lyra. It was Celine who was embarrassed by him. Why? That was totally unexpected. Of course, she had thought he would neglect Lyra after being charmed by her smile, but Lane did not give her a finger of his attention. Realizing that she could no longer intervene between them, Celine bit her lower lip and decided not to waste any more meaningless time. When she tried to leave, saying that she would go upstairs, the Count gave her a present. It was a jewelry box with tightly packed jewels that the Count had only given to Lyra in the past. There were a few cute little ornaments inside. Yes, that's enough for now. It was quite a step forward from the past, when she had received nothing. Wasn't she simply getting paid for a piece of information? Moreover, the attitude of the Count, who had always been cold in the past, had changed, and the occasional warm glare was directed to Celine from time to time. Celine, who left with a graceful smile, unlike the one before, escaped from their world. She hurried back to the room and changed her clothes. That was because she saw the dress Lyra was wearing before the party started, so it would be very easy to bring her to spare since she had waited until that day to wear the dress Oscar had given her. How would you react if I showed up at the party in a similar dress? At the very least, it wouldn't be a good response. Those who would gather to celebrate Lyra would also express wonder. The mere thought of it made her feel good, as if she were flying across the sky. It wasn't until about lunchtime that Lyra's birthday party began. As usual, they used the entire first floor to greet the guests. The Count's business partners and close nobles gathered one after another. Many of the young ladies who had a close friendship with Lyra also attended and filled their seats. Celine observed it quietly through the window of her room, and it was not until the party was ripe that she appeared. As she went down to the first floor with a bouquet of flowers, which was not readily available, in her arms, the eyes of those who were enjoying the party were naturally drawn to her. It was natural to pay attention to a beautiful girl with a bouquet of colorful flowers in her arms, even more so as most had never seen Celine, and the rumors about her were plentiful. The guests watched excitedly as Celine approached Lyra. "Lyra. Happy birthday, sister." Lyra looked around, unable to hide her anxiety and awkwardness. She seemed worried that Celine might make an irreverent remark, just as she had done during Celine's birthday. Immediately afterwards, her maid, Emma, came to her. Standing behind Lyra, she kept her guard up against Celine, stiff-faced. "Do you know who you are?" It was too funny. Celine, of course, had intended to insult Lyra. She wanted to create an event that would bring a lifetime of humiliation at a party that she felt she deserved to celebrate so that she wouldn't be able to sleep well until her head was chopped off, like it had happened to Celine herself. "Don't you like the bouquet? I prepared it with care." "No. Thank you, sister." Once Lyra said the word sister again and again, the people in the hall realized that the beautiful girl was Celine. There were those who accepted that she was as enchanting as the daughter of the prostitute who had lured the Count, and who were shocked to see such a difference between the rumors about her evilness and the real person. Celine enjoyed the looks and controlled the situation to indicate that Lyra and she were good sisters. She hoped they'd misunderstand the relationship between Lyra and her as much as they liked. That way, no one would suspect that her own scheme was what humiliated Lyra. When Lyra accepted the bouquet, Celine's dress, which had been hidden, was revealed. Lyra, who first saw it, stopped breathing, and the room fell silent around her. Celine smiled softly, like a fluffy snowflake that had just dropped, and set Hall ablaze. Chapter 56. Whoa, that dress. It's like my dress, isn't it? Did you get it as a present from Oscar last time? I didn't know. I only checked my dress and went out, but it suits you very much. Lyra staggered like a flame that was about to go out. Celine hadn't said much, but from now on, Lyra would have to suffer from tens of thousands of speculations and questions. Why does the wicked woman have a similar dress to the one Mr. Oscar gave Lyra? Celine covered her mouth with a fan, and after a glance through the hall, took a place right next to a group that had a good relationship with Lyra. Most of them would later become members of a group led by Lyra, and they used to say and do things that made Celine feel humiliated whenever they met her. While Celine was watching their behavior, she came across the eyes of a lady. Laughing as bright as a rose, the lady hurriedly turned her eyes, which had grown like the eyes of a frightened rabbit, away. Oh, yes. It's you. Not by name, but I remember your face very well. There was still innocence in her young face, but later, that face would turn into a devil's shell. And you stood against me in the past. Celine recalled the curse she had heard from her before. She's a woman who shakes her hips cheaply. She is suitable for a dark, shady brothel. The lady had smiled and disappeared with a triumphant expression, thinking that she had touched Celine's core, whether she had known the words coming out of her mouth were inferior to those of a prostitute rolling in the gutter or not. Well, she looks more vulgar than I thought. I don't think she's very bright. Maybe she's going to help destroy the atmosphere. Does she really think she's a noblewoman? Then, how shameless and ridiculous she is. What about the dress? Maybe she was just jealous and bought it after Lyra? Maybe. It was very clear to whom that conversation seemed to be referring. Only the name was left out, and the sound of it was not reduced, as if they were trying to be heard on purpose. They didn't hesitate to talk about the Countess, who had greeted the visitors with the Count, either. There was also a lady who wiped her eyes with a handkerchief while saying that Lyra was pitiful. Jessica watched nervously to see if Celine would make a fuss. But Celine didn't care at all. She just kept her place in an aloof and detached manner, listening to the music playing while the rancid words and smells flowed out of their mouths. It was Lyra who would be hurt if they talked about the dress and other things that day. Celine quietly showed off her beauty by eating the refreshments that Jessica brought her. The etiquette she had practiced with Sarah was impeccable. Those who criticized her for being too vulgar gradually stopped talking, as the rumors and Celine's appearance did not match, and those who were watching her mockingly hardened their expressions as they watched Celine. Lyra's smile as she greeted the visitors from afar was pitiful. Is this enough? This was enough to bring a question to the rumors about the daughter of the prostitute who always acted mischievously. She's always doing mischievous and unmannered things was a phrase that would disappear. As for being called the daughter of a prostitute, Celine had no intention of correcting that since it was true, and there was no way to erase that. Now, let's place one final curse on Lyra and leave. She glanced back and checked the box with the hourglass that Jessica was holding. Touching the beautiful pocket watch hanging from her neck, she wondered how to insult Lyra. Lyra foolishly still had an angelic smile, not knowing that the wicked woman was agonizing over her evil trick. It was then that Lyra's face suddenly brightened beyond description by a late arrival. Who the hell is here? Celine looked away, following her eyes, and found a handsome, tall man there. The familiar figure was Darian, the Count's eldest son. Why is she so happy to see him when she can see him for the rest of her life? Celine, unable to understand Lyra's delight, leaned her head to the side and realized why Lyra became so excited. There was another behind Darian. Oscar. Why? He had always said he was too busy at the academy, so he had never attended one of Lyra's parties. He had not even replied to her letter, but he had come to this party. Why does he take care of Lyra even though we are better acquainted than we were in the past? Oh, he's the heir to the Frederick family. He has a good relationship with Lady Lyra, doesn't he? I think they're talking about the engagement. Even during the school year, it's definitely worth attending her party. Her fist clenched by itself. Watching Oscar and Lyra talking so affectionately made her cheeks twist. She bit her lip while paying attention to the conversation that did not sound distant. It was not just Celine, but everyone in the hall was looking at them. Not just because the image of the two together looked good, but because Oscar was the eldest son of the Frederick family, which was second in power only to the imperial family. In addition, Lyra was the daughter of Count Vermont, famous for his tremendous wealth. They deserved the attention because the combination of the two houses was expected to cause a great impact. The eldest daughter of the Frederick family also drew great attention due to rumors of her engagement with the crown prince. If they all got engaged and married smoothly, the empire's power and wealth would gather in one place. It was important to get acquainted with any one of them somehow, and the most accessible one was Lyra. Don't you think they really look good? I'm sure they are a really beautiful couple. As Lyra paid attention to Oscar, flattering words poured out of Lyra, who never looked at the others. Celine, who didn't think Oscar would show up, became one of the onlookers, simply watching that day's center of attention. Why does he give his heart, which he had never given to anyone before, to Lyra now? What did I do wrong? She thought about it, but she couldn't figure out what she had done wrong. She thought she had been doing very well, but she had no idea where and how things had gone wrong. While looking back into her past now that it had become difficult to act hastily, her eyes met Darian's. Darian had ended his reunion with Lyra and was looking around the hall. He glanced up and down at Celine with a look of astonishment, questioning if she was the same girl he knew. He seemed quite surprised to see the change to her height and weight while he was away. Facing those eyes, Celine smiled softly, as if by habit, her long eyelashes batting like a butterfly's wings. Darian was not her target, so she had no intention of seducing him, but like he had done before, he showed his weakness to her beauty, something he had in common with his father, and fixed his eyes on Celine unblinkingly. Darian? They should have started moving once the conversation ended, but Darian, who was next to Oscar, seemed stunned in place even after Oscar called his name a few times. Darian did not move, whether he couldn't hear his friend or was ignoring him. Lyra, who wondered about what was happening, also called his name. Oscar turned to the spot where Darian's eyes were directed to see on what his attention was so heavily focused. Then, Oscar, like Darian, looked upon Celine. Her more mature appearance, even though they had met only a month ago, was enough to win over the mind of the immature Oscar. Celine smiled at the two while enjoying their eyes on her. As expected, I did nothing wrong. They were familiar looks. They were familiar eyes. That was a familiar situation. That was the only reason she had been able to survive in society. In that familiar, natural situation, Celine regained the confidence she had lost momentarily and shook off her uneasiness. Yes, every time he ran into me, even though it was for a short time, he was bewitched by me. I clearly remember his gaze, so it couldn't have been wrong. Chapter 57. Celine, who was not embarrassed by the glare of the several eyes around her, laughed leisurely and got up from her seat to approach them, who were all still young. It's been a long time, Darian, my brother, and Mr. Oscar. Her curtsy was so gentle and graceful that once again the words were blocked out of the men's minds. When she saw Lyra's face turning pale next to them, Celine struggled to resist the impulse to ridicule her. Well, did I make a mistake? When Celine asked that out of those who had not answered even though she had said hello, Oscar, who came to his senses, finally replied. Darian still seemed unable to adapt to Celine's change in appearance. Forgive me for my rudeness. I haven't seen you in a long time. Forgiveness? Don't say such a word. Oscar turned his eyes straight after he said hello. Noticing that his vision was slowly creeping back to her, Celine realized it wasn't because he didn't want to see her or because he hated her that he hadn't responded. He couldn't help it because people's eyes fell upon her naturally. Celine expressed her feelings with a fresh smile when she felt she had ruined Lyra's birthday even though she hadn't acted as planned. "Are you sick, brother?" Darian was still gazing silently at the changed Celine. Even after she pointed him out twice, he did not think of correcting his behavior, only staring at Celine more intently. "Brother?" It was only then that Darian responded with a quick blink. But instead of greeting his stepsister, with whom he was being reunited after a long time, he turned to face the other way and replied shortly, "No." Celine smiled awkwardly at this. Isn't he like a child? When it comes to a woman's age, he is an adult now, so why does he turn his face, too scared to give a proper answer? In the past, she had been afraid of him. She had surrendered and let him take her life. Thinking of it even now, it was not funny. Only the melody coming from the string instruments filled the quiet hall, so Celine lowered her gaze. She lowered his eyebrows sadly and bit into her pink lips. Now was not the time to insult Lyra. There was a man there who would give her greater torment than a mere insult. "Oh, I don't think this place is for me. So, I'll go up." Celine, with her wretched expression and shoulders hunched over, looked very pitiful. Oscar, who forgot when and where he was, reached out to her. However, his hand quickly returned to its place after she hurriedly bowed and disappeared. In the hall Celine had left, Darian, Oscar, and Lyra remained silent, different emotions swirling within them. Celine didn't go back to her room. Her destination was the indoor garden on the second floor. The place was open to guests, so it was fully decorated, but no one was there because the center of today's party, Lyra, did not leave the first floor. Celine enjoyed the refreshments that Jessica brought with the hourglass on the table, wondering whether Oscar would appear there or not. Judging from her long experience of having played with men in the palms of her hands, Oscar's eyes and disposition evidenced his good feelings toward her. He didn't even know what his heart was due to his brusque character, but she could tell because his eyes and attitude were different. Perhaps, he was tormented by his constant swaying in Lyra's presence. So, that's why he came to the birthday party. Did he want to ease his guilty mind a little? He's cute. The green tea was still sweet without a cube of sugar. Celine, who enjoyed the sweetness with her red tongue, eased her posture and leaned back on the sofa. The process of turning someone she didn't like into hers was very enjoyable and exciting. Does he think of my face every night? That was why he couldn't reply to her letter. He might have suffered from a guilty conscience. What Oscar had just shown of himself made Celine think so. Whatever the reason, it was good. The relationship between Oscar and Lyra would go wrong if it continued like this. It was enough to create a rumor about their broken relationship yet, but she would be a hindrance. That way, Lyra would taste despair bite by bite, until her life was forfeit. Jessica, who was attending to her, also smiled cheerfully when Celine burst into laughter. That was because her master had looked very unhappy at the party, but she had managed to regain her smile. Of course, Jessica was confused by the sudden change in mood, but anything good was good. She was only happy when her master was happy. Celine waited for Oscar in the garden alone for a long time. She waited until the tea had been changed 3 times and the refreshments had become damp. Because she was bored, she even asked Jessica to bring her a book. And luckily, Oscar appeared around the time Celine had turned a few pages. "Am I disturbing you?" "Not at all. It's a garden open to all." His expression was complicated. He seemed to be regretting something, but that didn't change anything. He was in the garden where Celine was enjoying herself. Oscar, sitting opposite of her, pulled something out of his sleeve. "What is this?" "It's a reply letter. I brought it because I thought we'd meet today anyway." It was the long-awaited reply letter from Oscar. She didn't think he would bring it in person, so Celine accepted the letter without being able to hide her expression. It was warm because it had been put inside his sleeve. "Thank you." It shouldn't have been possible, but she had been worried because he had not replied. So, receiving the warm letter made her feel strange. It might just be about everyday occurrences, but the fact that he had gone there to deliver it in person made her feel strange. Celine, who blinked a few times to shake off her strange feelings, reapplied her mask. Did you enjoy the party? Well, I didn't like it very much. Oh, I understand. The party was not a pleasant place. It was more like a place to test and speak ill of others. In the past she had enjoyed and attended many parties, but rather than the parties itself, she had enjoyed the people there who had loved her. Of course, all they had loved had been Celine's appearance. Without acquaintances, it's even more difficult. I agree. I don't have any acquaintances with whom to attend the party. Would the party be a fun place to make an acquaintance? Well, personally, I find it better to meet new friends at other places. Because of the consensus between them, the two were able to talk without any sense of disapproval. Oscar's expression of regret loosened a little. That's right. It's more convenient to talk now, in the garden, than when we met on the first floor, right? You can say so, Oscar answered Celine's question after pausing a little. It wasn't just the place that made it easier to talk to her. It was because Lyra wasn't there. He felt guilty talking to Celine in front of Lyra. Why? A brief surge of agony passed through Oscar. If Celine was a simple acquaintance, a letter exchange with her as a friend would not be a problem for him, whether Lyra was present or not. However, why couldn't he be honest when Lyra was around? He couldn't even tell Lyra that he was exchanging letters with Celine. He didn't hate the exchange of letters. On the contrary, he was a little pleased by Celine's letter, which had conveyed her simple, daily routine. Before falling asleep, he even thought of Celine's face as she wrote her letter earnestly, even though he had never thought about Lyra that way. When are you going back? I'll head back around evening. Are you going back after dinner? He wasn't planning to. Unlike last time, he had let the Duke's mansion know of his whereabouts this time, so he would go to his house and have dinner there. Besides, he was there for a miner's birthday party, so it would all be over before sunset. Therefore, there was no need to waste time late into the night in that inconvenient mansion. He hadn't planned to do that. Yeah. That's great. It had been a long time since I'd met my friend, so I wanted to talk to you a little bit more. Chapter 58. But, he couldn't answer that way. Why? Maybe it was because he had looked into Celine's eyes, which had been expecting a little bit more. He didn't want to disappoint her despite the inconvenience. In addition, Oscar also wanted to have a little time to converse with Celine. I've been lonely lately because I've been eating alone in the dining hall. My father was not here, my mother was busy, and Lyra didn't come down because she was sick. I'm happy because I think it's going to be quite noisy today. Celine was smiling with joy, and he was clearly enraptured by her eyes. The extent that she had grown up from a child to a mature girl while he had not seen her was enough to make Oscar's heart tremble. Seeing how much she had liked his answer made him want to return only in the morning, but he couldn't. He had to attend an early morning class, so he couldn't delay. As he agonized over what to say about the cut-off conversation, Oscar's eyes fell on Celine's dress. It was the dress he had given her. He wished he had sent her a more luxurious dress. It wasn't a cheap dress, but it wasn't even the dress he had picked as his favorite. It was just a modest dress as a thank you. Somehow, he regretted that. Nevertheless, the dress seemed as if it was the only beautiful and noble thing in the world, benefiting from Celine's colorful appearance. It was truly amazing. You look great in the dress. Even though he was not the type to say this, he could not help but praise Celine for her beauty. He was worried that she might think him strange, but she just seemed glad to be praised. I'm just glad you said that. Celine's eyelids, slowly blinking, were like the wings of a butterfly, and the drawing of her lips looked very sexy. He felt something indescribable. He was often speechless because she looked more beautiful than when he thought about her alone. Oscar swallowed loudly. He drank tea several times to relieve his thirst, but his mouth was dry. What he was doing felt special even though the conversation didn't drift off from topics like the weather getting cold or if his classes were difficult or not. Time went by in a flash. I'll see you again at dinner time. Oscar nodded silently. The reason he wasn't rude, though, was that his expression was completely at ease, and his eyes only pursued Celine. Celine, smiling like the sun, left him, leaving a gentle air lingering behind her. It was like a mirage. He tried to reach out and hold it, but Celine had already disappeared. What the hell is this feeling? His heart throbbed. The flow of time was strange, and his brain, which had always been praised for its brilliance, did not function properly. Oscar stared down at his empty hands for a while in the quiet indoor garden empty of people. Of course, the focus of the dinner was Lyra. It had been the same originally, but it was all the more so because of the man named Lane who had come with the Count. He paid a great deal of attention to Lyra and asked her many questions. I've heard that you've given advice to the Count several times. You're still young, so how did you acquire that vast amount of knowledge? That vast amount of knowledge? I just picked it up here and there, Lyra responded shyly as her cheeks turned slightly red. Celine swallowed a snort and ate the soup. Did Lyra ever help the Count? She had suggested some lame ideas, but they hadn't really helped. The Count had never used them in his business. Although he had praised her whenever she had given him her opinion, he used to say, "My daughter's idea is extraordinary." Who had really helped him was she, so Celine wondered why Lyra took all the credit. It all depends on you using even the tiniest bit of knowledge. No matter how much information and knowledge you have, it's useless if you can't use it. In that regard, it is safe to say that Lady Lyra, who has always given advice to the Count, has an outstanding ability. Is that so? Yes, my master was very surprised to hear of Lady Lyra. He says that you are amazing at your young age, even though he is very meticulous. I don't know who your master is, but I'm glad he gives me a favor. The Count, who was watching Lane kindly compliment Lyra, said, I haven't met him yet, but he's done a very easy job of solving the troubles of this business, so I think he's a great man. Oh, my God. Is that so? Yes. I'd like to meet him. My master's schedule is tight now, so it will take a little time, but I have come to visit you on his behalf. Huh, I see. I suppose I can't easily meet a busy man. I'll schedule a meeting in the near future. I'll be in your care. Lane seemed somewhat snarky in the way he poured out praises to Lyra and the Count, and was eager to appeal to his master's merits. Celine, watching the scene, was quietly lost in thought. What on earth does he want? Does he want to connect Lyra with his master? Or is he himself looking for Lyra's favor? Whatever it was, there was no hope. There was no way Lyra would give her heart to anyone other than Oscar. No matter how great Lane's master was, would he be greater than the heir to the family of the Duke of Frederick, who had power second only to the imperial family? Without him being the crown prince, Lyra would not be interested in him. Celine laughed inwardly at his continuing efforts and went on eating. She didn't say a word at dinner that evening. No one spoke to her, and there was nothing else to say. Besides, she didn't feel the need to talk about this or that because she was with Oscar. Pretending to be pathetic would work better for him. Sure enough, Oscar looked sideways at Celine throughout the meal. He could not speak to Celine as all the people of the family of Count Vermont, including Lyra, were there, but he could not stop being conscious of her. Celine enjoyed the gaze and smiled at him from time to time. It was a smile that implied, this is how they ignore me, but I'm okay. When she first met him, she sat down facing him and ate like this. She was completely ignored by Darian and Lyra, but his reaction was a little different from then. At that time, if it had been like seeing a poor girl. Now, he was in a terrible mood for Celine's sake and didn't know what to do. Oscar's face grew colder. Mr. Oscar and my brother, are you going back to the academy after finishing your meal? That's what we're thinking. We just took the time off to come here. When Celine looked at Darian, who answered, their eyes met. Like Oscar, he glanced at her throughout the meal. She had not responded to him even a bit, but he seemed rather satisfied with that. Thank you for coming on purpose, though you're busy. I love your gift so much, Lyra said, pointing to her neck. A bright, shiny necklace hung from her long, slender neck. There was nothing but the necklace, but it looked like a gift from a lover. The present made Celine feel strange. It must be quite hard for him to walk the tightrope between the elder sister and the younger sister. It wasn't a bad feeling. Rather, there was a little excitement. How painful it must be for him to pay attention to both sides. Celine was sure Lyra would be sick and tired of watching Oscar, who kept staring at the wicked girl, by now. Celine alone felt pleasant. "Mr. Oscar?" "Ah, yeah. It's nothing. I'm also glad you like it." Oscar, who was distracted by something, was not able to give a proper answer until Lyra called his name twice. Lyra's expression grew more and more awkward. It was Lane, not Oscar, that soothed Lyra, so Celine swallowed a laugh as she watched Lyra's birthday be spoiled. "By the way, I made something while my father was away." Lyra tried to freshen up the mood, so she changed the subject brightly. At that moment all eyes fell on her, even Celine's. Chapter 59. Lyra's struggle during the Count's absence was to learn embroidery, but there was no way to brag about her hack embroidery work, so Celine was curious about what the hell she was going to do. "It's a little late, but I've tried to embroider a handkerchief." Lyra took out the handkerchief, and Emma, who had been waiting behind her, took it to the Count. He was seated quite far away, so the handkerchief was not visible to Celine, but considering Lyra's age, the embroidered handkerchief she had made was excellent. The Count's satisfied laugh filled the dining hall. "What great work! Do you like it?" "I was worried because I'm young." "I can't believe you are young. It's a lily more beautiful than any other in the world." "Is it because the handkerchief was embroidered by his biological daughter?" The Count praised Lyra's handkerchief as if it had erased the one Celine had given him last time. The Countess helped, pretending to be surprised, and Lane and Darian also expounded lavish praise on her handkerchief. Celine stared at the handkerchief that came to her through everyone. "How could you do this?" Unlike in the past, the embroidery on the handkerchief was pretty good. Lyra had only been able to reach that level before after a few years of practice. "Don't tell me. Isn't she lying? Wasn't this made by someone else?" But there was something awkward about the embroidered work, so Celine was sure that it was Lyra who had made the embroidery. "Great, Lyra. What the hell is going on? How did she suddenly grow that much in skill?" Lyra was not very good at embroidery, but she was much better at it than in the past. Even if she had spent more time learning it now, shouldn't her fundamental skill level remain unchanged? Celine couldn't guess why she had suddenly grown. "Really? I'm so happy. I finally feel what it is to be recognized by you," Lyra said, wrapping her cheeks in her palms. Celine had become the wicked woman again because Lyra spoke as if Celine had never praised her. "A bitch like a fox." Celine chewed her gums and tried hard to keep her face from shuddering. Lyra had to know that everyone would praise her even though she was lacking in comparison. Unlike Celine, who was perfect but underrated, Lyra was the daughter of the Count. "So, you were able to put it forth without hesitation, even though it's far inferior to the one I made the other day." Unlike the daughter of a vulgar prostitute, Lyra was a noble girl who was loved for whatever she did. "I'm just glad you gave me that compliment. I've made a few more. It's not much, but I'd like to give them as a gift to celebrate today." "You showcase your handkerchief in a cowardly manner just like in the past. You must have been desperate to hand Oscar a handkerchief." The Count, who would always be happy with it and accept it, is an exception. Who would refuse to receive a handkerchief that was given as a souvenir? Oscar would have to keep it or carry it with him because it would be a handkerchief received from the girl supposedly engaged to him. There's no doubt about that. Did Lyra know Oscar was coming? Or did she make him come? Either way, it was clear that she had been looking for a chance to hand him a handkerchief all day. Emma handed out her handkerchiefs to the Count, the Countesses, Darian, Oscar and Lane after waiting for Lyra to finish her sentence. Celine's turn was the last, but instead of handing over the handkerchief like she had done to the others, Emma looked embarrassed and bowed. "I'm sorry, but I'm short of a handkerchief." It wasn't surprising. She pretended it was not there. If Lyra had made a wonderful handkerchief, she would give it to Celine, but Lyra would not give her one because Lyra's embroidery skill was beneath hers. Lyra, who had so woefully prepared for that situation, wondered what to do with her eyes open wide. Don't tell me. Does that mean you don't have a handkerchief for my elder sister? Yes. What shall I do? It's childish. Is that because you are still young? Do you want me to get hurt by such a small thing? That won't happen. Celine was a terribly wicked woman, so she could not get hurt for not receiving a handkerchief. Besides, there was no need for it. She was used to Corinne's handkerchief, so Lyra's was not even as good as a rag in comparison. It's all right, Lyra. We see each other every day, so I can get one next time. Lyra, who did not answer Celine's response with a gentle smile, suddenly smiled awkwardly. I'm so sorry. I really wanted to give one to you. No, it's fine. Now that you've made such great embroidery in such a short period of time, I can't wait to see how excellent your embroidery will be next time. Is that so? Lyra's reaction was bitter. She seemed disappointed that the response was not what she had thought it would be. However, she blinked a few times to fix her expression and soon projected a face that was moved. I'll try hard to meet your expectations. Don't worry. You've always been good, even without trying. Regardless of your skills, you've always been like that. And you won't have to worry anymore because the idiots around you are going to cheer you up. The evil sisters of the Vermont family kept their smiles until the meal was over. After Lyra's birthday, the year changed. In the meantime, Celine sent a letter to Oscar and kept a close relationship with the wives through classes. She also built a close relationship with the Count, who had no business trip scheduled for the time being. She did not give him any information yet because the timing was not good, but she was able to maintain a smooth relationship just by staying out of trouble. And she didn't get a handkerchief from Lyra. She didn't expect to get one, but she realized again how foolish Lyra was from such a natural consequence. Why was I so jealous of her in the past? Lyra wasn't as great as she remembered after her return to the past. Since she had received all kinds of education since she was very young, it was natural that she had more knowledge than the daughter of a dumb prostitute, and that she had perfect manners. In the past when Celine had known nothing, Lyra had looked great, and Celine had felt like there was a big wall between them, unlike now. It would take a while, but Celine thought she could jump as high as possible over any wall. Maybe I've already jumped over her. Through that birthday, Celine realized that Lyra had a childish disposition, like an immature child. So, Celine needed to build power first before Lyra could grow up and take control of the mansion. A debutante ceremony would soon be held that year, bringing together the grown-up aristocrats. After that, there would be a meeting for Corinne, who was coming of age in that same year. So, Celine called Annie, whom she had not called all this time. Miss. She had a very shabby expression. Is it because she was neglected for a while, or because she misses the colorful life she enjoyed for a while? Maybe both, but Celine overlooked the reason for it and defined it as a longing for herself. I haven't been able to call you because I've been busy. Unlike Jessica, who stood by the door, Annie was sitting on the sofa. Annie was always special. Celine treated her in a way to make her feel special, and she hoped she felt it. That way, it would be easy for Annie to compare Celine to Lyra and weigh both of them. Patting Annie's roughened skin, Celine whispered as if she felt sorry for Annie, "Why did you lose so much weight? Where did your soft skin go? How pitiful you are. Miss." Annie looked very moved by Celine's sudden worry. But there was nothing I could do about it, wasn't there? I didn't feel the need to carry two maids. Celine didn't have to take Annie because what she wanted from Annie was not her servitude. Annie was also very aware of that. There'll be a meeting soon. I'm definitely thinking of taking you with me. Chapter 60. She would be meeting with Corinne, who would soon have a huge rise in status. Corinne would tell her the story of meeting Marquis Vincent at the coming-of-age ceremony. Corinne had been born a noblewoman, but her family was not powerful, so to Annie, she would seem more like the Countess, her mother. Annie would be envious and jealous of her after facing that reality. Then, the only one Annie would be able to hang on to would be Celine, the only person who would take her away from the gruesome life of a maid and make her wear fancy jewelry. To do that, you'll have to take good care of yourself from now on. Celine ordered Jessica to bring some perfume water from the melted herbs concoction. It was water used mostly by aristocratic ladies when their skin was damaged, a valuable item that would give them a distinctly glossy skin if used only 2 or 3 times. Annie, who was still young and ignorant, was easy prey for Celine. In the past, Celine had frequently used those products since her skin had deteriorated from drinking every night. Your skin must be the kind that works well with the product, Celine said, simply impressed by how Annie's rough skin had cleared with one application of the product. Come to think of it, this was worth it. Given that Annie would only have been able to see someone about her skin as a last resort, when would she have ever received such high-quality skin care? The sudden supply of nutrients in deficiency must have had a great effect. Annie fell into ecstasy, touching her lotioned face again and again. Oh, come to think of it, I have a question. Celine was giving Annie a second chance. This was also an opportunity for her to repay the grace that she had just received and the wealth that she would enjoy in the future. Staring coldly at Annie as if she would not give her a second chance if she did not answer correctly that time, Celine asked, Lyra's embroidery skills have improved significantly. Do you know why? It wasn't very important information. Annie could tell her that as if she were telling her a light tale. Nevertheless, that was the information Celine wanted to know most of all. No wonder that Annie, who had been graced by Celine several times, did not hesitate. Ah, well. Miss Lyra had a hard time at first, but she suddenly improved her skills after changing her teachers. I watched the lessons a couple of times, and the teachers' explanations were very simple, so I understood it quickly. She changed teachers? That was it? Lyra's changed teachers a lot. What kind of teacher is she? Yes, the new teacher was someone Miss Lyra nearly never saw. She was going to go out of the country to marry, but Miss Lyra managed to find her before that and bring her here. Miss Lyra said that if she had been a few months late, she wouldn't even have known her name. That meant that, in the past, since she had started her embroidery lessons a bit later, she would not have known of the teacher. But, she was able to meet the teacher this time around. Yes, because the timing had advanced, she had gained a variable. Regardless, all that work didn't matter much because there would be no more embroidery competition between them. Anyway, Celine had already beaten her to a draw. So, that's what happened. That's very fortunate. Celine gently swept Annie's hair. It was the price of betraying her master and siding with the wicked woman against her master. Then, Celine gave her a golden brooch. She seemed to recognize her fault and become anxious, but the golden brooch glowed brightly in contrast with the maid's gray uniform. It looks better than I thought it would. As expected, Annie, you look great with jewels. The more you decorate yourself, the more you'll shine. At that moment, Annie's anxiety vanished in a flash. The satisfaction of the gold far outweighed the betrayal of the saint. For that reason, she would side against her master again and again. Well, and when the teacher embroidered most of the pattern first, Ms. Lyra finished up the parts that she had left open. Oh, my God. So, that's what happened. Siding against someone for the first time was difficult. The second time and the third were easy. In addition, a person who had once betrayed someone could never return to her original place again. Lyra would not be able to use her maid to do anything bad against Celine. Celine smiled softly, expecting that chatty maid to cause a disturbance in the mansion. One day, with the meeting just around the corner, Lane visited again with a wagon full of presents. There were men who sometimes pushed for quantity rather than quality, but most of the gifts he brought weren't readily available even at a high price. This is a gift from my master to Miss Lyra. Oh, my God. The Countess was dumbfounded, and it was the same with Lyra. That was because she had only been trying to marry Oscar, so instead of accepting gifts, she had previously devoted herself to offering them. Oscar had always given something to her in return for her attention. Compared with him, the difference between the gifts was like the difference between heaven and earth. What kind of man is his master? It was not something an ordinary nobleman could prepare. If an ordinary nobleman sold his entire fortune, it might be possible, but it was hard to understand that he would sell his whole fortune to send periodic gifts when he hadn't even shown his face. Therefore, he had to be an extraordinary figure. Is he a foreign aristocrat? Otherwise, there was no way he could give all of that attention to Lyra. It was like throwing money on the street to shower a homeless woman. Maybe he didn't know much about Lyra or the Vermont family. No matter what, he must be stupid. If he had investigated them just a little, he'd have known that she only had eyes for Oscar. Or is he a big, powerful man who doesn't care about that? If that was the case, Celine had to divert the attention that was being poured on Lyra. It was just in case she changed her mind and found a new love. The Countess, Lyra, and Celine had lunch with Lane because the Count, who was busy, was out. Celine, as she had done last time, ate her meal slowly, watching Lane, who was paying extreme attention to Lyra. Unlike usual, the dining hall was noisy because the gifts he had brought this time were enough to excite the Countess, who was speaking more loudly. I'm embarrassed that I haven't treated you better when you keep bringing Lyra so many gifts. Don't mind that. It's just what my master wants to do. What kind of person is your master? I wonder about that since he's so interested in Lyra. Lyra's eyes glistened at the Countess' question. She had become interested since receiving the piles of gifts. Celine, too, pricked up her ears and waited for Lane's reply. I can't reveal it yet. But the response was very disappointing. Lane's face turned dull, as if that was really hard for him to answer. Nevertheless, the Countess did not give up and urged Lane on, asking for some information. Celine agreed with her. Lane, with a troubled face, carefully opened his mouth as the Countess continued to urge him. Well, he is the heir to a larger family. He's been carrying a significant burden from a young age. He said that since he liked smart people he had become interested in Miss Lyra. How did he know that our Lyra was smart? He said he's met her face to face. And while he was using me as a messenger, that's what the Count said as well. He met me face to face? Lyra asked back, puzzled. She looked oblivious to any memory of such an event. When and where had she met Lane's master when she rarely went out? Celine also questioned that. Yes, I can't give you details, but he said he's met you. I don't remember that. It has been a while since you ran into him, so it's possible you don't remember it. Is that so? Lyra still looked puzzled. Undoubtedly, she might have run into Lane's secretive master. After being silent for a long time, she said only one word, maybe. Did I meet him the day I was out with my brother?